What's up, everybody? Let me go ahead and shift this down a little bit. Grand Arising. Good afternoon, good evening. Let's wait for people to come in. Woo! We have a lot to talk about today. Um, I had to set my little work area up. Good morning, my love. How are you guys? Welcome. Thank you for being here. Super excited to be hanging out with you today. I'm grateful that you are here spending time with me. One of the most sacred gifts that we are given is time. And I'm so appreciative that you guys have chosen to spend that time with me today. So, we are going to be talking about quite a few things today. July is quite possibly one of the most intense months astrologically of the year. I think that July is also going to be one of the most pivotal months for a lot of people, especially mutable signs, Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, and also cardinal signs. If you have your sun, moon, or rising in Aries, Capricorn, Libra, or Cancer. I do believe that this month, starting with this week, is going to be kicking off a series of changes for a lot of people, or it's going to be motivating them or activating them, maybe in an uncomfortable way, to kind of move in some type of way. Okay. We do gotta, keep in mind though, I'm going to be talking about, the Mars Uranus conjunction coming up on the 4th. I'm going to be talking about the full moon in Capricorn that was ruled by Saturn and Aries. I'm going to be talking about Mercury retrograde in Cancer. We have Mars in Gemini now. There's just so much. Jupiter in Leo. Jupiter went into Leo. Mars went into Gemini. We have a Mars Uranus conjunction in Gemini. Mercury went retrograde the day of the full moon in Capricorn. It's just a lot. I get it. It's a lot. But we are here. I am here today to break it down for you all. Okay. But one of the things I want to remind you of, or that I want to forewarn you about, is I do think that this month is going to be difficult or hard for some people. I do think that people are going to be made uncomfortable, or there's going to be some kind of agitation or conflict that initiates and kind of maybe enforces or triggers people to make some kind of change or move in their life, or to begin looking for greener pastures, okay? Because in some ways, they may be sitting in a job that's on fire, going up in flames, or they be maybe having a relationship that's dead end in some type of way, right? Or there could just be things in their life that are kind of coming to an end, certain cycles, certain narratives, certain timelines that are coming to a close for some people. So we're going to be talking about that today. Okay. It's July 1st. Happy July, happy month of July for folks. Let me go ahead and write some stuff down. Well, let me see something really quick. Okay, we're about 4 minutes in. So we started at 10:07. I'm gonna try to do timestamps moving forward on my long form content. So when this gets posted to YouTube, and also when I post it on here, I'm probably gonna go back. I'm gonna say probably. I can't make any guarantees. I'm gonna do my best to go back and add timestamps because I know that my lives tend to be very, very long, and I would like people to be able to, if they want to know more about Mars Uranus conjunction, or if they want to know more about Mercury retrograde, they could go ahead and jump to a certain chapter in the live, and they can go ahead and get those deets. Okay. So I'm kind of what should we start off with? Yeah, no, what should we start off with? Actually, I think we're gonna start today with the full moon in Capricorn because I didn't go over that. Um, Capricorn. We had our full moon in Capricorn a few days ago. I believe it was on Monday. Let me just double check and make sure. What's today? Today's Wednesday. Yeah, we had our full moon in Capricorn on Monday. And I kind of want to start with the full moon in Capricorn because I do believe that this full moon is congratulations on making it back down for Portland. Yeah, thank you. The move was intense. I'm not gonna lie, y'all. The move was I had a lot more stuff than I had anticipated. I had like 4 boxes of books. I had 3 boxes of spiritual stuff, trinkets. There's just so much stuff that I had. And it wasn't until I was getting into the nooks and crannies of my apartment that I realized, like, oh my God, I got so much ish. Like, it was a little overwhelming, but we did it, you know? And my parents, they helped. They were an amazing help. I'm so grateful to have parents that were willing to fly all the way up to Portland and help me move back to LA, you know? I'm very grateful for that. But they did an amazing job. I was, going between my mom and my dad, and I was orchestrating the move. I was helping my dad pack the van, but then I was helping my mom clean up and pack things at the same time. It was just like a lot going on, but we pulled it off. Here I am in Los Angeles. Thankful to be here. Um, and before we dive into the full moon in Capricorn, I just want to share this one insight, okay? Environment matters. Where you're living, okay? Who you're living with, whatever conditions of your environment, whatever you're surrounded by, I cannot tell you how much of an impact it has on your psychology, on your spirit, on your soul, on your well-being. Like, if you are not energetically meant to be somewhere, you will feel it in your soul. Like, you will feel it in your spirit, you will feel it in your body, you will feel it in your skin. And if you ever get that feeling that, when you find yourself in an environment, you're like, wait, I should not be here. Or this is not for me. Or you just feel this big repulsion to the environment, you gotta go ahead and make the change. You gotta shift something because environment is so important. This is one of the things I realized living in Portland. I did not like Portland. It was not a good energetic place for me. I do think that I was brought to Portland to kind of like grieve and go into isolation and to kind of go deeper into my own spiritual journey, and into kind of like dark night of the soul spiritual journey, though, not like, oh, fun, joyous, sunshine, rainbows. I'm talking to God, spirit. No, not like that. No. I'm talking about loneliness, cold, isolation, sadness, crying every day. Like that's the dark night of the soul spiritual work that I was doing over there in Portland. And I will never go back. I swear I will never live up in the Pacific Northwest. I will never live in the north side of the world or too far south because I am not someone that is meant to be in the cold. Okay, I'm not someone that is meant to be in an environment that is gloomy and dim. I was not designed for that. My energy is not, I'm a sun person. I emit solar energy. I'm a joyous, loving, expressive, loud, bright energy. And my energy was being so depleted and being so deprived when I was in Portland. And I realized, like, I was brought there for a particular reason. Even when I moved to Portland, I had a dream of the apartment that I moved into a year prior to me moving there. I had a dream, and those of you that have been following me for a while, you know this. A few years ago, like what was it? 4 years ago now, 4 years ago now, when I moved to Portland, I shared a story of a dream that I had posted a year prior in 2021, because I moved to Portland in 2022, of me living in an old brick building with wooden floors. And that's exactly what I ended up living in, an old brick building with wooden floors, and I loved my apartment. So I know that I was brought there for a reason, but I was not meant to stay, and I'm so grateful to not be there anymore. But with that being said, it's super important to always remember that your environment matters. The people that you're surrounding yourself with matters. Like, the place you're living in matters. And if you feel like you are not meant to be somewhere, if you find yourself in an environment that is not catering to your well-being, you do everything you can to make the change and shift that environment and get the hell out of there. Okay? Because I think I stayed in Portland a lot longer than I needed to. I should have been out of Portland like a year or two ago, when I knew it wasn't for me. I was trying to give it a chance, though. I did not make any friends over there. The friends that I did make were weird and awkward. Um, I just couldn't build community there. I just could because my energy is too loud, too much. Um, I'm a powerhouse. I'm a force to be reckoned with. You know what I mean? And a lot of the people that I was connected to just did not vibrate at my frequency, and they just did not. I did not get them. They did not get me, and it was just a very different energetic experience. Okay, so, but anyways. let's go ahead and talk about the full moon in Capricorn. Let me just put this right here. So this full moon in Capricorn that we had this past Monday was ruled by Saturn in Aries. Okay. And Saturn in Aries is dispositing to Mars, who just entered Gemini and who's hitting a conjunction with Uranus. And so, one of the things that we're going to see with this full moon and Capricorn cycle this week and next week. So, one of the things we always want to remember with a full moon and a new moon cycle is they happen in 2 week increments. So, when we have a new moon, we are in that new moon energy for 2 weeks until the following lunar event happens, which will be a full moon, right? And then it resets the energy, and then we're in the full moon energy for 2 weeks. Okay. This is something that's really important because we are like, we tend to think that, or many people may be mistaken in thinking that, oh, the full moon is only relevant, the day of, the day after, or the day prior to the full moon and the new moon. Well, actually, no. The new moon and the full moons set the precedent for the next 2 weeks, and they set the energetic tone of what we're gonna experience. One of the things we always want to remember with the moon is that it is the fastest celestial moving body, right? The moon changes signs every 2.5 days, roughly. And the moon is because it moves so quickly, it kind of activates things and it triggers things. And it kind of sets the precedent of the current energetic tone that we're in, when it comes to astrology. So this is why, a really good practice, if you are, wanting to work with your chart, or if you're wanting to kind of, practice astrology daily or use astrology daily, um, and see it come alive, it's a really good practice to track the moon and to follow the moon in your own chart and to see, what moon, house your moon is in, the moon is transiting, if, the moon is hitting any of your planets on that particular day or that particular moment, to see how that comes alive for you possibly, it's really cool. You'll be able to see the development of certain stories or certain timelines in your own chart by following the moon throughout your chart day to day. It's a really cool thing. Like, on a moon Jupiter conjunction, you'll go to the doctor that day, or you'll have a court date that day, or you'll get good news that day on a moon Jupiter conjunction when the moon is transiting your natal Jupiter, right? A lot of really cool things that you'll be able to track and see when you are following the moon. But anyway, so with this full moon in Capricorn, we always want to remember that full moons are about culmination, are about completion, are about release and surrender, letting things go, right? A full moon is when the moon and the sun are directly opposite each other. So full moons also tend to create rupture. They tend to create a little bit of tension, right? But they also illuminate things. They bring things to fruition, to completion, right? When the moon is full, it's at the apex of its cycle with the sun, right? The sun and the moon are at their farthest distance before the moon keeps going, right? And then returns back to the sun for the new moon 2 weeks later, right? So one of the things we always want to remember with the full moon is that, there's themes of release, surrender, completion, endings, also things coming to light, illumination, revelation, epiphany. These are all, full moon words that we always want to consider. This particular full moon is it was in Capricorn, and the moon is in detriment in Capricorn. So what does that mean? The moon does not feel comfortable in the sign of Capricorn. The reason being is because the moon is in the sign opposite of what we call its domicile, or opposite of the sign of its own rulership. So the moon it rules a sign of Cancer. So when the moon is in the opposite sign of its rulership, it's going to be in detriment, which is where it's weak. And this is a really easy way to remember if planets are going to be in detriment, or are going to be in fall, or are going to be exalted, or in domicile in their own rulership when it comes to looking at a chart, right? A planet opposite of its own sign is always either in detriment or fall, usually in detriment, okay? Mercury is exalted in the sign of Virgo. Mercury goes into his fall in Pisces, the sign opposite of the sign that he rules. Mercury is in domicile and rulership in Gemini, and he goes into detriment in Sagittarius, the sign opposite of his rulership, right? It's a very simple way It's a little bit of a shortcut way to remember planets that are strong or weak in a given sign, okay? But one of the things I also want to say is that even if a planet is in detriment or what quote unquote weak in a particular sign, that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that it won't carry out its function. What it means is that it's going to have to find alternative ways, constructive ways, roundabout ways to accomplish its task and to express itself. Someone asked, what's the difference between detriment and fall? So when a planet is exalted or fallen, its exaltation is like it's extra strong, it's extra powerful, it has extra amount of agency in that sign, and it's going to bring extra good results. When a planet is fallen, it's kind of like a step below detriment. It's gonna be very difficult, find it really hard to express itself. And the combination of that planet and that sign can lead to kind of troublesome or disastrous results. Okay. And this is what we have with Saturn right now. So Saturn is fallen in Aries, but he's exalted in the sign of Libra. Why is Saturn fallen in Aries? Well, let's talk about it a little bit. This ties into the full moon in Capricorn because the full moon in Capricorn is ruled by that Saturn in Aries, right? Aries is ruled by planet Mars. And Aries is the sign of fire, is the sign of destruction, is the sign of violence, is the sign of impulsive action, right? So Aries can be a very malevolent sign with it being the masculine side of Mars, right? Saturn and Mars are known as kind of like the bad guy planets. They rule over all the things that are difficult or hard or the things that are painful and troubling. And, Mars in Aries rules over guns and violence. Saturn in the sign of Capricorn rules over constriction, deprivation, lack, rules, regulation, authority. So when you put Saturn, a really cold planet, okay, because Saturn is considered cold, okay, and he's considered dry. When you put Saturn in Aries, which is one of the hottest signs, Saturn gets agitated. He gets pissed off and frustrated. And he gets more abusive, he gets more mean. Saturn is already known to be a mean, cold planet. Well, if you put him in Aries, a sign of war, what do you get? You get a planet, you get Saturn being not only mean, but also violent, dangerous, explosive, having a bad temper, and creating chaos and creating violence, which is why Saturn is in his fall in the sign of Aries. Saturn is exalted in Libra, the sign of peace, the sign of balance, the sign of fairness, the sign of justice. Saturn does extra well in the sign of Libra. And we can also see this because Libra is the sign of what? Relationships and partnerships. And when Saturn is placed in Libra, this is about, balanced power dynamics in relationships, right? This is about, long-term commitment, marriage and contracts and going the distance with your partner and, loyalty and all these really beautiful things. But when Saturn's in Aries, he's like, F you, let's fight about it. Like it's a very different energy. So because we have this full moon in Capricorn on Monday with a moon that's in detriment, right? Being ruled by Saturn in Aries, who's in his fall. And also, the moon is in the 10th house away from Saturn, and Saturn and the moon are technically in a sign-based square with each other. And if we know about aspects, squares are aspects of conflict and tension, and squares kind of will initiate a battle. Squares are connected to planet Mars. So if we want, if we're talking about aspects, squares are ruled by planet Mars or they carry the energy of planet Mars. And so, squares as an aspect, they tend to create conflict and tension or even instigate situations or kind of force us to confront something between those two planets when they get activated in transit, right? So because this full moon in Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, right, that is in fall, that is squaring this Capricorn moon, this tells us that there's going to be moments of frustration, moments of conflict, or moments of difficulty, or moments of hardship when it comes to this full moon. We're also going to be seeing people kind of ending and beginning things. So, there can be certain things that are coming to an end, especially if you are a cardinal sign, if you have anything around 8 degrees of Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, and Libra, because you're caught up in this full moon, right? In Capricorn, this full moon in Capricorn, if you have any placements around 8 degrees of a cardinal sign, this full moon in Capricorn is either going to be either hit you directly with the conjunction, it's either opposing you, right? If you have anything at early degrees Cap or Cancer, or it's squaring you if you have anything in the first decan of Aries and Libra, right? And so this can be a very important and very physical and very tangible full moon for you that could bring some kind of conflict or bring some kind of competition or bring some kind of moment of difficulty and challenge and hardship where you have to what? You have to fight for yourself, Saturn and Aries. You have to assert boundaries, full moon in Capricorn. You have to tell someone no. You have to release something. You got to let something go. Or you may even realize, like, hey, you know what? I cannot fix this. I cannot solve this. I cannot resolve this situation. I just gotta go. I gotta burn it down. I gotta let it go. Saturn and Aries, because one of the things that I do think Saturn is going to be showing a lot of people this week and next week during the full moon and Capricorn cycle, they're going to be showing them what is no longer giving life, what is no longer growing. They're going to show them what has become burdensome, what has become heavy, what has become non-negotiable, what boundaries need to be established or where overstepping of boundaries is happening, and we got to put our foot down and all this stuff and all that, right? And also the releasing and the rupturing of contracts. So one of the things we always got to remember with Capricorn and planet Saturn is Capricorn and planet Saturn rule over time, rule over our long-term commitments. Capricorn is also the sign of career. It's a sign of ambition. It's a sign of our goals, of our drives, where we're headed, where we're going, the mark that we want to leave in the world, right? Capricorn rules over legacy and things like this. And so what I'm getting with what I got with the full moon in Capricorn squaring the Saturn in Aries, if something is not building towards a legacy, if you don't see longevity with something, if you feel like, your time with this thing is coming to completion, or if it's become burdensome, or if a contract is no longer serving you, or if a commitment is, heavy and toxic and whatever, right? This full moon in Capricorn is going to kind of push people, is going to support people kind of breaking those contracts and releasing themselves from these things and setting themselves free because their time has come to an end with this particular thing. Especially if you have anything around 8 degrees of a cardinal sign. Okay. Point. There's an example. I have an example. Okay. Recently, a few days ago, it might have been yesterday, the day before, LeBron James said that he announced that he is leaving the Lakers. Okay. LeBron James has a Capricorn sun. Hold on, I'm looking at his birth chart real quick. Um, at 8 degrees, I think. Hold on, I was looking at it a few days ago. His Capricorn sun is at 9 degrees. He's a Gemini rising with a 9 degree Capricorn sun. The sun and Saturn have a lot to do with our career, our public image, our public reputation, the directions that we're going in when it comes to our career and the way that we show up in the world, or what we're here to kind of give to the world, right? How we're here to shine. So, full moon in Capricorn, right on his sun. He also has a moon in Aries that Saturn is sitting on. So his moon is at 16 Aries, and Saturn is at 14 Aries right now. So Saturn is sitting on his moon in Aries, and this full moon in Capricorn, he literally announced, I am ending my contract with the Lakers, and I'm going on a new journey. I'm beginning a new frontier when it comes to my career, right? We don't know where he's going to go. I don't think this man's going to retire. I just don't see that for him. I think that this man is going to be joining another team. I think he's going to get signed, and it might be a little shocking. It might be a little surprising with who he gets signed by. I do think someone's going to pick him up, and we should be seeing some insight or information onto where LeBron James is going to be headed with the eclipses coming up in Aquarius and Leo. This is his third and it's his third and ninth house access. And Jupiter also rules the seventh house of contracts. He's Gemini rising, so he has Sag in the seventh house. So I do think Jupiter's ingress into Leo and Jupiter maybe coming into a trine with his moon is going to give us some insight into what the next team is that he's going to join. Okay. But I'm just sharing this example with LeBron James because if you are someone with early degree cardinal placements, like I was saying, do not be surprised if this full moon is pushing you to end something and begin something, or this full moon is kind of initiating and opening up a new chapter for you while another one is coming to a close. Okay. Overall, collectively, with this full moon in Capricorn, we're going to be seeing a lot of people kind of reconsidering their career directions, how they're here to show up in the world and things like this. Another thing that we got to keep in mind is that this full moon in Capricorn is also intimately tied to the Mercury retrograde in Cancer, you know? So, I'm going to talk about that separately, but I want to speak to Mercury retrograde in Cancer being tied in to the full moon in Capricorn because Mercury went retrograde right? Mercury went retrograde in Cancer, but Mercury is also opposing the full moon in Capricorn by sign, right? So one of the things that's also really interesting with this full moon in Capricorn is I do think that there's going to be an element of going back because one of the things that okay, the full moon in Capricorn tied into the Mercury retrograde in Cancer, I do think that there's going to be things where we're going back to the past in some type of way. We're going back to things that are comfortable or familiar or secure or supportive. Or some of us, because of the full moon in Capricorn with Saturn and Aries, we know we've been feeling beat up, we've been feeling exhausted, we've been feeling drained, we've been feeling burnt out, we've been feeling, there's been fights or conflicts or tension, especially if you're a cardinal sign. And the Mercury retrograde in Cancer is like, here, come to mommy. Come to your come home. Come to mommy, come to your friends, come to the things that make you feel good and supportive and nurtured and cared for, right? And it's really important that, I think the Mercury retrograde is giving us an opportunity to really pivot because it's tied to the full moon in Capricorn. And I think the Mercury retrograde is going to be so important again for cardinal signs, for Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, and Libra. I think this 2 week full moon in Capricorn cycle that's tied in with the Mercury retrograde, I think we're going to see a lot of people with cardinal placements, especially their sun, moon, and rising. I think we're going to see a lot of people with cardinal placements kind of go back to the drawing board, kind of go back to school maybe. Maybe they're going to go back to an old job, or maybe they're going to pick back up a hobby or a craft or a business idea or revisit something that could be opportunistic or that could be, expansive or that could be abundant. And they're going to be like, okay, let me restart this thing or let me go back to this thing that feels maybe a little bit more safe or secure, maybe feels a little bit more stable, right? Or things like this. I think it's really important. I think it's a really important thing to consider. The other thing that's likely is, Cancer has a lot to do with home and family and our living situation. And so what we may also see with this Mercury retrograde in Cancer, especially because it's tied into the full moon in Capricorn, and this is going to be particular for cardinal signs, Capricorn, Aries, Libra, and Cancer, is reconsidering where you're living, reconsidering your home, the situations of your the situations and circumstances of your living conditions and the people that you're with, right? I think we're going to see a lot of people kind of maybe moving or kind of planning to move or maybe even selling property, real estate, or even planning to move in with someone new. I think this is going to be a big theme with the full moon in Capricorn and with the Mercury retrograde in Cancer, especially for cardinal signs, like I was saying. Another thing is, Jupiter left Cancer, right? And Jupiter has gone into Leo. That's gonna be a whole nother conversation. But um, Mercury retrograde may be because Jupiter just left Cancer and Mercury's going backwards and he's gonna be going through the degrees, the late and middle degrees of Cancer, and then he's gonna move forward again. There could be something that Jupiter in Cancer had for you that Mercury comes back to get. This can be an opportunity. This can be a lover. This can be some kind of magical miracle thing. And I don't know. The Mercury retrograde in Cancer was giving me retrieval of some kind of abundant opportunity or some kind of blessing or some kind of connection that you may have missed while Jupiter was transiting Cancer over the last year. Okay, and this may not just be relevant for cardinal signs. This could also be relevant for water signs because you guys were getting the trine from Jupiter. This can also be relevant for earth signs who are experiencing opposition from Jupiter in Cancer or the sextiles, right, from Jupiter in Cancer. So I just want you guys to keep this in mind over the next 3 weeks as Mercury's retrograding in Cancer. This kind of possibility that Mercury could bring something back from the past that is good, that is abundant, that is magical. Okay. And yeah, I'm okay. I I want to keep the conversation tied to the full moon in Capricorn. All right. One of the things I will say though is that during well, actually, oh, I think it already passed. Yeah, the moon squared Saturn already. One of the things I do want to say though is that because we do have a Mars Uranus conjunction this week, and it's tied into the full moon and Capricorn cycle. I just want to warn you guys around potential conflicts or potential arguments or potential falling outs with people when it comes to the current astrology and this astrological climate. Okay. I would be very mindful of engaging in religious or political dialogue that could potentially lead to arguments on the 4th of July. If you are someone that is planning to hang out with your family on the 4th, you just want to be very mindful of those that are kind of older and stuck in their beliefs or stuck in their opinions or stuck in their perspectives. You know, engaging people that are really committed to their own, perceptions and values and politics and beliefs and whatever, it rarely breaks ground. It rarely brings any kind of success or any kind of change. So just be intentional with the battles that you choose to fight over the next 2 weeks. And if someone wants to fight with you, is declares war on you, you do not have to engage. Be very intentional with be intentional and selective with how fight, and not all fights are worth fighting. I have Mars and Libra, I'm on Pisces rising, so I'm a peacekeeper, and I will avoid fighting at any moment, like at any possible way. I do not fighting and arguments and conflict. That shit stresses me out. Okay, I do not like it. I avoid it like the plague. That's just me. But if you are a warrior spirit, well, I do have a warrior spirit. I do have North Node, Jupiter, and Aries. But if you are a warrior spirit, if you are someone that has a strong Mars, or you are easily triggered and easily angered and things like this, just be mindful of this energy, okay? Because you may feel very agitated and irritable, this week and next week. You may feel frustrated, and things like this. I'll talk more about that when we get to Mars, the Mars Uranus conjunction in Gemini. Okay, I'll talk more about that. But we got to remember Jupiter has gone into Leo. People are feeling bold. People are feeling confident. People are feeling like they want to express themselves, like they want to be seen, like they want to, shout from the top of the rooftops, their beliefs and their opinions and their ideas and all of this. So we just got to be mindful of the Jupiter ingress into Leo in combination with Jupiter sextiling Mars and Gemini. Jupiter in Leo is I am right, and my ego and my identity and my pride is tied to my beliefs. And Mars in Gemini is I disagree with you, and let's argue and let's fight about it, and let's throw hands. Gemini rules what? The hands, the arms, and your speech in your mouth. Okay. And if there's one thing I know about those that have Mars and Gemini, okay, because I have a few friends that have that placement, is they love to throw hands and they love to talk shit. Okay. They love to argue. And they love to disagree. They love to disagree. Yeah, Gemini also rules the lungs. Exactly. Yes. They also love to play devil's advocate. They love to argue, they love to disagree. And it's also a placement for liars. That's another one. You'll see this with Mercury and Mars in Gemini or Sagittarius, and also Pisces. Mercury, Mars in Gemini, Sagittarius, and Pisces. These people like to lie sometimes. They like to cheat. They like to steal. Okay, they like to play devil's advocate. They like to argue for the sake of arguing. It's true. I'm telling you, especially if you have little kids. Notice this, if you have little kids, if you have children that have Mercury, Mars, in Gemini, Pisces, or Sag, you got to watch them when they're young because they will, if they're like 4 or 5 years old, they will walk into a store and they will steal something. I promise you. And they'll walk out with something in their pocket and you would never know. It comes up a lot in my readings when I do readings for kids, or I do readings for parents and their children. Anyways, so yeah, I just want to be mindful of that with this full moon in Capricorn cycle, being disposited by Saturn in Aries and then being disposited by Mars in Gemini, who's approaching a conjunction with Uranus, right? And then the Mars in Gemini is being disposited by Mercury in Cancer, who's retrograde, and this brings us back to the full moon in Capricorn, right? Because the full moon in Capricorn is ruling over the sign of Cancer, and so there's kind of like this, this exchange of energy that's happening between Mercury and the full moon in Capricorn, right? Another thing that we got to keep in mind is, Mercury's retrograde, so miscommunications, people feeling very sensitive, heightened emotional states, people getting emotionally triggered by things that were said, people attacking you with information from the past. We'll talk about that when we get there, okay? All right. Actually, okay, it's 10:44. Let's talk about Mercury retrograde in Cancer. Since we're like going in that direction anyways. All right, hold on. Let me talk about this. Okay. So we've been in the Mercury retrograde shadow for the last like 2, 3 weeks. 3 weeks, you know? And now, as of Monday, we have entered Mercury retrograde. So Mercury is going to be retrograde from June 29th all the way until July 23rd. So we pretty much have Mercury retrograde in Cancer for the rest of Cancer season. Okay. Um, and Mercury retrograde. So what's happening with Mercury right now, right? Mercury, if you look up in the sky, well, actually, you might not be able to see him. I don't think you'll be able to. Maybe on a, what is he? He is an evening star right now. He's sitting right next to Jupiter. You might be able to see him, but you might not. But so what's happening is Mercury, he's gone to the farthest point away from the sun, and now he is going back to conjoin the sun. And so during Mercury's retrograde period, what he's going to do is he's actually going to hit a conjunction with the sun, which we call a cazimi, and then he's going to go to the opposite side of the sun, right, as the sun is continuing to move, and then he stops and he stations because he can only get up to, what is it? I think he can only get up to 24 degrees away from the sun. And then the sun pulls him back and he, does his little spin and then he goes direct and then he begins following the sun again. And then he catches up with the sun and then he goes past the sun and then he starts the whole cycle all over again, right? So that's what Mercury retrograde is. So the midpoint of Mercury retrograde, the actual Sun Mercury cazimi will be on July 12th. Okay, let me write that down here. Sun Mercury cazimi will be on July 12th. And Mercury retrogrades, why are they important? Because when Mercury goes backwards, we tend to reflect on decisions and choices that were made. And one of the things that I've noticed is also we tend to make very important decisions, or we tend to solidify things that we're considering, like decisions that we're considering, and we tend to pull the trigger on major decisions. Okay. And this is one of the things that I have noticed as an astrologer who is practicing and who does readings for people daily, okay, is that even though, you hear a lot of hoopla around, oh, Mercury retrograde, don't make any, don't make any decisions and don't make any commitments and don't sign any contracts and blah, 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 blah. What I've actually noticed with clients is that many people do make important decisions or choices, or they solidify and commit to a decision, or they undo and reverse a decision during a Mercury retrograde. Okay. And especially when people, I did a post on this for those of you that have been looking at my posts. I did a post on this just today where what I noticed is that when people have a lot of retrograde planets in their chart, like they have Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, everything retrograde in the chart, whenever retrograde periods happen, things tend to move forward or progress in their life, or that's when they make big commitments, they make big life decisions, and there's like big changes, okay? This Mercury retrograde is going to be important again for the cardinal signs, just like the full moon in Capricorn I was talking about just now. It's going to be very important for the cardinal signs, Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, and Libra. We're going to be seeing a lot of cardinal signs, especially if you have anything in the last decan of Mercury or of Cancer of a cardinal sign. So if you have anything in the last 20 to 30 degrees, 20 20 to 29 degrees of a cardinal sign, or if you have anything in the middle decan. So if you have anything around 10 to 20 degrees of a cardinal sign, this Mercury retrograde in Cancer is going to impact you, especially if you have your sun, moon, or rising in these parts of your chart, in Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, or Libra. This Mercury retrograde can literally be about a return to something, a review of something, a revisiting of something. Something from the past may come back to haunt you. This can also show up as people of the past coming back, specifically family members. Cancer is a sign of family. Cancer is a sign of the mother. Cancer is a sign of childhood, right? Of our upbringing, where we grew up and the people that we went to school with. So with this Mercury agent retrograde in Cancer, especially for cardinal signs, what you may find is that there are people that come back from the past. Lovers. Someone messages you that was in love with you in high school, and they're like, oh my God, I've been thinking about you for the last 30 years, and you never left my mind, and you look so scrumptious, and I was just waiting for you to get a divorce. Mm. It happens a lot. It happens a lot. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is why people don't want their husbands and wives on Facebook anymore, because they'd be having those old high school lovers reach out and be like, "Hey, I noticed you got some marital problems going on. You don't look too happy over there. Why don't you come on over here, okay? Let's go ahead and pick up where we left off when we were 16." All right. So just be mindful of this kind of like things from the past coming back. Cancer is the sign of nostalgia. Cancer is a sign of memory, right? Cancer is a sign of emotional attachment, right? So Mercury retrograde in Cancer for many of us is going to be very nostalgic. Music from the past, television shows from the past, toys from the past. Mercury also rules over objects like things. So, when we're talking about a Mercury retrograde in Cancer, we're talking about family heirlooms, being handed down, or you may find, something that belonged to your grandmother or your great grandmother, or you may find something that, is tied to your family tree and your ancestry in some type of way, right? That's what Mercury retrograde in Cancer could be about for folks. This kind of past coming back to haunt them in some type of way, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could be a very positive, good thing as well. Okay. If you are someone that is looking for a job, or if you're looking for work, one of the things you always want to do during a Mercury retrograde is you want to go back to old applications. You want to follow up on old applications. If there was a conversation you had with the manager that was about to hire you, or let's say, you're about to get hired and there's a hiring freeze a month or 2 months ago or last year, you always want to reach out to those people. Because what Mercury retrograde could do is bring you an opportunity that was passed on before, like in the past, it could bring an opportunity or work experience or work or job, something from the past. It could come back. You know what I mean? So I always tell people that, especially if you're looking for a job, because Mercury rules over jobs. Mercury is the planet of jobs. Mercury is what? Your day-to-day routine, your habits. And what is a day-to-day routine and a habit? A job, right? So Mercury being the planet of jobs, of coworkers, of your day-to-day routines, Mercury retrograde can literally be about a return back to an old job or even, an old application coming back to be processed or an old opportunity coming back that manifests, right? So, especially if you have Mercury impacting your sixth house or 12th house or your first or your seventh or your, second, sixth house access, second, eighth house access, sixth house, 12th house access, 10th house, fourth house access, or first and seventh, if you are a cardinal person, if you're a cardinal sign, you have a cardinal Mercury, you have a cardinal Saturn, you have Saturn and Mercury in Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, or Libra. This Mercury retrograde can literally be about work and jobs and a reshuffling of routines for you. The Mercury retrograde is also kind of giving us an opportunity to take a look at the things that are no longer working for us, especially things around our home, around family, around the past, around our emotional upkeep, our emotional well-being. This is a time that is putting a lot of stress on people emotionally and psychologically. And so, this Mercury retrograde, if you are someone that's been struggling, okay, emotionally and psychologically, use this Mercury retrograde to go back to the habits and behaviors or to go back to the routines and schedules that really nurture you emotionally, spiritually, mentally, okay, that really take care of you. Cancer is just as much of a psychological sign as it is an emotional sign, you know? Um, the mind and the emotions are very intertwined and they're very close together. They're like layered on top of each other. And a lot of times, our a negative emotional state is feeding a negative mental state, and they're creating a negative feedback loop with each other, right? So one of the things that's very important with this Mercury retrograde is to kind of go back to the self-nurturing routines, to go back to the self-nurturing habits that are really good and supportive, okay, so that you can kind of create a solid foundation of emotional security and safety. And I think that's what this Mercury retrograde is going to be asking a lot of us is how do we find comfort in our life? How do we find support? Who are the people that love us? Who are the people that nurture us? What are the things that make us feel safe? What are the environments that make us feel protected? What are the people that really give us the energy of family? And how can we invest more time and energy into those connections, into those relationships? You know what I mean? I think it's really important that we reflect on that during this Mercury retrograde in Cancer because, these are challenging times, right? These are chaotic times. There's, a lot of energy of crisis and destruction in the air. And right now, more than ever, I think we need this Mercury retrograde to give us a little bit of like a moment of rest, to give us a little bit of a safe space. Like, there's so much chaos, so much craziness going on in the world. Like Mercury retrograde in Cancer. Let's just chill at home, let's just hang out with the fam, let's just go to dinner, let's go ahead and, give ourselves a good home cooked meal. Let's hang out with the people that we love, right? And things like that, with Mercury retrograde in Cancer. So, but yeah, if you are a cardinal sign, this Mercury retrograde over the next 3 weeks. So it's going to be from June 29th until July 23rd. This Mercury retrograde is going to be possibly very pivotal for you. May have you go back to the drawing board and may have you make some very important decisions or choices where you are shifting your foundation. And that's another thing that I think is going to be a huge theme this month for cardinal signs, especially Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, and Libra. Their foundation, like the foundations of their life, are like shifting. Like the things that they've built their life upon are like shifting. The full moon in Capricorn is going to show them this. Or the full moon in Capricorn is going to initiate some kind of release or closure or some kind of ending or rupture, right? The new moon in Cancer that's going to come up in 2 weeks is going to be kind of like this opening door, this like initiation, right? It's interesting because the new moon in Cancer, let me actually take a look at it really quick. Let me take a little bit of a gander. Let me take a little bit of a gander. I think it's actually going to be with Mercury retrograde. I think it's going to be sitting with Mercury. Yes. It is. So the new moon in Cancer is conjoined Mercury, who just had a cazimi with the sun a few days, like a day prior, a day or two prior. So this new moon in Cancer that's going to be on July 14th, it's going to be at 22 degrees, and it's going to be, the sun's going to be separating from a square with Saturn. But guess what? Mercury is retrograding back into a square with Saturn in Aries, right? Mercury's retrograding back into square with Saturn in Aries. So this month, the cardinal signs, Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, and Libra, we're really going to see them kind of dealing with some kind of disruption, some kind of conflict, some kind of irritation, some kind of war, some kind of ending, release, closure, and then kind of the setting of new foundations, the beginning of new contracts, also the evolution of current commitments. I think this is another thing that we're going to see with cardinal signs. We're going to be seeing them kind of going deeper in relationships. We're going to maybe see them getting promoted when it comes to work and career stuff. We're going to see them, moving in with the partner or deciding to buy a home, like things like this, we're going to see some very, very interesting things with the cardinal signs this month. The full moon in Capricorn is kind of opening up the door of change, the portal of change for them. And then the new moon in Cancer is going to kind of be the beginnings of this like new foundation being set in some type of way. And it's tied into the Mercury retrograde. I will say though that this is kind of like a confusing time. This is a kind of a muddled time. It's like, it's like the sky is falling, the sky, like this is happening, and this is happening. There's earthquakes over here, and there's fires over here, and there's floods over here, and people are falling from the mountains over here. Like it's just a lot going on, right? So we gotta remind ourselves to stay grounded and stay focused. We gotta also keep in mind that it is not our work to carry all the emotional burdens of the world. You know, I think, the news and social media can really become, a place of trauma porn. You know what I mean? Where it's just fear mongering and it's just death and destruction and crying and tears and suffering. And we got to be very mindful of what we're putting into our psyche at this time, of the information that we're absorbing, right? Because I'm going to tell you, watching traumatic, crisis, sad, tragic things all day, it's not good for the spirit. It's not good for the psyche. And it can really be damaging to our emotional and our mental environment. So we got to be mindful of this. You know what I mean? One of the things, I do have a little bit of like a nostalgia for a time that came before me is the time before social media and the time before mass media and the time before television and radio, where your life was very localized, before social media, before, television, before, radio and stuff like this. Our lives were localized. Like your life was based off of your everyday lived experience and what the people you came into contact with. And that was your life. What was happening in Palestine or what was happening in Argentina or what was happening in Mexico was not an issue or was not a thing unless you decided to read the newspaper, right? Unless you sought out that information. You know what I mean? It wasn't just like thrown in your face the way it is now. So we just got to be very mindful during this Mercury retrograde and during this Cancer season. Cancer season is a very sensitive season. It's a very emotional season. We have a full moon in Capricorn, and the moon is struggles in the sign of Capricorn, right? It feels depressed. The full moon is in Capricorn, which leads to depression and sadness, right? People that know, those of us that have a moon in Capricorn, or we have a Saturn ruled moon, you have a moon in Aquarius, you have, Saturn aspect in your moon, you know that, pessimism, negativity, doubt, sadness, depression, you're more prone to that. It's easier to go to that space of negativity. It's easier to go to that dark place when you have Saturn influencing your moon, right? Well, this is the energy in the sky right now as we're in a full moon in Capricorn cycle during a Mercury retrograde in Cancer, right? So we gotta be extra positive. We gotta be extra joyous. We gotta be mindful of what energy, of what information we're absorbing, so it doesn't trigger us emotionally. It doesn't trigger us spiritually. It doesn't make us depressed or sad. Um, Obviously, we don't want to be ignorant and blindly optimistic. It's important to kind of be in the know and know what's going on, like politically and culturally and stuff like this. But also, there needs to be a certain element of detachment, right? Where we are not getting emotionally entangled in the drama and letting these things disturb our peace, especially if we have no control or power over them, right? So, this Mercury retrograde in Cancer, make sure you protect your emotional body, preserve your peace, take care of yourself, nurture yourself. Okay, give yourself what you need. And if you need to just like be in the covers for a day, under the covers for a day, if you just need to be at home and kind of, go and recede into your little Cancerian shell, right? Or whatever, do that. Give yourself what you need during this Mercury retrograde and Cancer cycle. Okay. All right. So it's 11:03. All right. Next thing we're going to talk about Jupiter in Leo. Okay. This is a really big transit. Um, when Jupiter changes signs, people tend to set new foundations. And Jupiter is the planet that rules over Sagittarius and Pisces. Okay, Pisces traditionally. And Jupiter also has a lot to say in the lives of Mercurial people, right? Geminis and Virgos, because Pisces and Sag opposes Gemini and Virgo, right? So what's so interesting about the mutable signs and what is very unique about the mutable signs is they're all ruled by two planets. They're all ruled by two planets, where the fixed signs and the cardinal signs are ruled by four planets each, respectively, right? So the cardinal signs, Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn, they're ruled by the moon, Cancer, Aries, Mars, Libra, Venus, and Capricorn, Saturn, right? The fixed signs, Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo, Leo is ruled by the sun, Taurus is ruled by Venus, Scorpio is ruled by Mars, and Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, traditionally, right? Where the mutable signs, Pisces and Virgo, or Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, they're only ruled by Jupiter and Mercury. Two of them are ruled by Jupiter, two of them are ruled by Mercury. So Jupiter moving into Leo on top of a Mercury retrograde in Cancer tells us that we're going to be seeing a lot of movement and a lot of activity and a lot of shifting energy, a lot of kind of, new beginnings, a kind of like fresh starts, a kind of, embarking on a new frontier from the mutable signs, Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius. Jupiter in Leo is going to be particularly good for Geminis and Sagittarius. Okay, the Sagittarii. Okay, the you want to know what I was gonna say? I bit my tongue, but I'm gonna say it. Okay, the meddling, troublesome characters of the zodiac, Sagittarius is. Okay, I was gonna say the demons, but I don't want to do y'all like that. You know, but we all know, we all know those Sagittariuses that are a problem. Mm-hmm. Though we all know those mischievous Sagittariuses, that can be a problem. Also, Geminis, Listen, Gemini and Sag, those signs are very, very mischievous. Okay. If there are two signs that love a little bit of mischief, they love a little bit of gossip, they love to instigate things, they love a little bit of drama. Okay. They love to incite conflict, not incite conflict, but they love to incite activity. They love a little bit of excitement. They get bored easily. This is why Sagittarius and Gemini, they're here for a good time and not a long time because they get bored. They get bored quickly. Oh, that was fun. You know, oh, the sex was good. That was fun. Oh, you know, that was great. Bye, I gotta go. There's more interesting things. And you'll see like with Sagittarius and Geminis, what's so funny about them is like if you can't keep up, they're gone. If you can't keep them engaged, if you can't keep them, if there's no fun or no excitement or there's no thrill, to the connection, if things get bored and stuff, they're gone. They're gone. They ain't gonna stay. Okay, they're roamers. The mutable signs, they love to roam. Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, they love to roam. Okay, what I will say though, Virgo, and Pisces, especially if you have your sun, moon, or rising. Jupiter and Leo is going to be a little difficult for you. Mutable signs, Pisces, Virgo. Jupiter and Leo is going to be amazing for Sag and Geminis. Go look at the post that I did on Jupiter and Leo for Sag, Gemini, Sun, Moon, and Rising. I just posted it earlier today when this live is done. If you have Sag, Gemini, Sun, Moon, and Rising, go take a look at that, okay? Um, Obviously Jupiter and Leo is going to be great for Leos and Aquariuses, but if you're a Virgo or Pisces, that's your six Jupiter's in your sixth house, 12th house axis now. Okay, so health issues, you know what I mean? Your daily routines, leaving a job, starting a new job, that could be the a more positive benefit. Also, a lot of Virgo and Pisces, guess what? You're getting a new pet. You're getting a dog, you're getting a cat with Jupiter and Leo. You listen, there's two signs that love animals and they will build their life around an animal. Like their life orbits around an animal. It is Pisces and Virgo. And now that Jupiter has entered their sixth house, 12th house axis, we're going to be seeing a lot of Pisces and Virgos getting an animal, getting a little pet because they need one. You need one. Honestly, pets are so good for Pisces and Virgo people. It's probably going to be a spirit animal, you know? But yeah, so Jupiter and Leo, right? Let's talk about Jupiter and Leo. When did I start talking about Jupiter and Leo? Oh my gosh. I'm just gonna round it to like 11:05. Jupiter and Leo is going to ask us to do things big, to do things loud. You know, Jupiter and Leo is going to ask you to kind of unlock your confidence, to unlock your inner celebrity, to take up space, to kind of shine, right? And to kind of really get clear with how you want to project yourself out into the world. You know, Leo is a sign of the celebrity. Leo is a sign of the CEO. Leo is a sign of the entrepreneur. You know, Leo is a sign of the king, the sign of the queen, right? The sign of the business owner. And so with Jupiter and Leo, we're going to be seeing a lot of people. I think this is going to be super good for fire signs and air signs in general. I think Jupiter and Leo is going to be amazing for you if you have your big three or if you have a strong concentration of energy in fire signs and air signs. Okay. I think y'all are going to be getting the best of it. All right. Um, Jupiter and Leo is an invitation for you to really take the stage and perform, for you to put your creative projects out there. And I also think we're going to be seeing a lot of people kind of shifting into independent work, shifting into entrepreneurial work, kind of like starting their own business, things like this, you know. If you do have your moon in a fire sign, Leo, Sag, or Aries, this can literally be about a child coming. This can be about the purchase of a home. This can be about, you know, some kind of growth or expansion with your family. You can have a sibling that's getting married, you know, you may be getting married. That's another big thing. Jupiter has a lot to do with ceremony, celebration, birth, creation, opportunity, risk taking, travel, right? Jupiter and Leo is going to look like for some people, especially if Jupiter's on, you know, oh yeah, for Sag, Gemini rising or Sun, Moon. You may this Jupiter and Leo could literally be about you taking your first big boy or big girl vacation. We're going to be seeing a lot of fire signs, especially Sag and Geminis. We're going to be seeing them go overseas for the first time. They're going to get their passport. They're going to visit Europe. They're going to visit Australia. They're going to go to Thailand. They're going to go to South America. They're going to go on a long distance journey. They're going to take a big vacation for the first time. You know, they're going to get their passport. We're also going to be seeing a lot of people kind of, you know, certain signs going back to school, educating themselves. Jupiter is the planet of what? Higher education, college, schooling, right? So Jupiter goes into Leo, Jupiter changes signs. Guess what? We have people going back to school. We have people going back to college. We also may see some signs, especially Gemini and Sag, placements, possibly even Aquarius and Leo. They may be finishing schooling that they never finished, you know? So Jupiter is going to be in Leo. Hold on, I got it right here. Someone asked, how long is Jupiter going to be in Leo? In Leo dates. Hold on, I'll tell you. From June 30th until July 26th of 2027. Okay. So Jupiter is in a sign for an average of 1 year. Okay. Jupiter is actually a very fast moving planet. He moves very quick. Okay. He only spends 1 year in a sign. He typically does one retrograde in a sign, and then before he goes direct and he moves to the next sign. Okay. Um, I, and the other thing we want to consider with Jupiter, he is the second largest planet in our solar system. Okay. Well, technically, if you don't consider the sun a planet, then Jupiter is the largest. But because we know the sun is a planet, we consider him a planet, especially in astrology. Jupiter is the second largest planet, right? So, because Jupiter is so massive and he has such an intense gravitational pull, when Jupiter moves, we move. And Jupiter has a lot to do with expansion and growth and change that happens in an opportunistic way or in a way that is liberating and emancipating and kind of like it frees us, right? So Jupiter loves to free us from things. And sometimes, Jupiter transits we may experience them in a way where they could be hard or difficult, but it's actually Jupiter giving us a way out of like a bad relationship, a bad marriage, a bad work experience, right? What's so interesting about Jupiter transits is many times, they will trigger an experience where there will be some kind of loss or some kind of ending or some kind of rupture. But then Jupiter comes in to replace whatever was lost or whatever has gone missing or whatever was released with something even better, with something even more magical, with something even more beautiful. And one of the things you always want to remember when it comes to Jupiter is that it's hard to pick up something new when you're already holding on to something, you know? And sometimes Jupiter's biggest task for you or his biggest ask of you is for you to drop what you're already holding on to so you can reach higher on the shelf and grab something greater, grab something more magical, grab something more magnificent. If you have a Leo rising, yes, this Jupiter in Leo transit is amazing for you. If you have any Leo placements, Jupiter in Leo is wonderful for you, you know? If you have a sun in Leo and Jupiter is going to be conjoining your sun. This is about expansion and growth when it comes to work and career. This is about you maybe getting promoted at your job, you launching your own business, or you finding success when it comes to the way you show up in the world, right? Or you can have a beautiful, pivotal, successful moment when it comes to career, right? If you have Jupiter in your rising sign, this can be about health in the body and good outcomes when it comes to the body. This could also be about being recognized or being seen because the first house has a lot to do with that. The first house has a lot to do with recognition and respect and being seen and being acknowledged, right? And Jupiter is also, he's the guru, right? Jupiter is the guru. Jupiter is the wise man. Jupiter is, he's the sage, he's the priest, he's the prophet. That's what Jupiter is. Jupiter rules over saints, priests, prophets, the Pope, right? Jupiter rules over the righteous, the moral, the ethical, right? And so with Jupiter and Leo, what we may see is Leo people getting more recognition or getting more honors or getting more respect. Another thing that Jupiter has everything to do with is graduation and ceremony, which is also why Jupiter is tied to weddings, and Jupiter is tied to retirement parties, and Jupiter is tied to the obtaining of degrees, or even a graduation, right? If we think about, if we think about when does graduation season happen, right? Think about it. When is graduation season? When are people graduating? What season? Gemini. The sign in the season of what? Schooling and education. But what is opposite of Gemini? Sagittarius. The sign of what? Higher education, the sign of college, a sign of ceremony and celebration, which is why we what? Have graduation season during Gemini season. It makes sense. It's all astrologically appropriate, right? So when we're talking about Jupiter, we're talking about ceremony and celebration and graduation. We're also talking about rewards and recognition. People get their flowers during a Jupiter transit. It was so fascinating is when all those Pisces were winning, during it was the Grammys. Was it the Grammys or was it the Oscars? It was the Grammys, right? Yeah, it was the Grammys. It was the Grammys earlier this year. Yeah, I was in February. We had all the water signs, all the Pisces Cancer folk winning at the Grammys. All of, it was like all of them, all the winners, okay, had key Pisces placements. Because why? Jupiter was in Cancer, trining Pisces. Jupiter was also right. So it was so interesting to see how at the Grammys this year that happened in February, um, there were so many winners that had water signs, that had water placements, key water placements. You know. Also, I don't think it was just the Grammys. I think it was the Oscars too, right? Michael B. Jordan, he ended up winning. Yeah, he won the Academy Award for Best Actor. And he has the North Node in Pisces. He has Jupiter in Pisces and Mercury in Pisces and the North Node. And he ended up winning, he ended up winning whatchamacallit? Best Actor, for his movie Sinners. And that was an amazing movie. If you haven't seen Sinners, you are missing out. You should go check it out, right? It's so interesting because he played twins. He was a twin in that movie. And he has tons of mutable placements. He's a Virgo rising, he has Chiron in Gemini. He has the moon in Cancer, He has the moon in Cancer. Um Along with Jupiter, Mercury, and Pisces. So he's very mutable. Mutable signs have everything to do with duality, have everything to do with twins, things that come in pairs, things that come in twos. You see this with mutable signs all the time. Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sag. They will have two jobs. They will have two lovers. They will have two families. Especially the mutable men. The mutable men, the Virgo, the Virgo, Sag, Gemini men are infamous for this. They have two families, they have two lovers, they have two jobs. Okay? Things that come in pairs, things that come in twos. The mutable signs are the signs of twins, the doubling up of things that come in pairs, right? She said, "Can I get two houses?" I got two lovers and I ain't ashamed. Two lovers and I love them both the same. Let me tell you. Okay. All right, let's get back. Let's get back. Let's bring it back. Jupiter and Leo had to do a little bit of a performance right there. Had to break out into song for a quick second, okay? But yeah, we're going to be seeing a lot of fire signs winning, with Jupiter and Leo. We do have this very complex, interesting thing that will be happening in August once the eclipses go into Leo and Aquarius, and once the nodes shift into Leo and Aquarius, and once the North Node goes into Aquarius and the South Node goes into Leo. We will talk about it once we get there, but I really do think for this month, we need to relish in the beauty and the abundance of both Jupiter and Venus being in the sign of Leo, especially this week and next week. Because once the nodes shift into Aquarius and Leo, once the eclipses are hitting Aquarius and Leo, and once the South Node is with Jupiter, things are going to be a little wonky. Jupiter is not going to be able to dish out his blessings and his abundance. Jupiter coming to contact with the South Node and being co-present with the South Node is going to afflict him in some type of way. Okay. It's going to be challenging for Jupiter. And we'll talk more about that when we get there because, we have quite a few things to talk about. We still have the Mars Uranus conjunction in Gemini to talk about, and I still want to go through the astrology of the week. Okay. Or the play by play breakdown, the day by day breakdown of the astrology. That's where we're going to end this live. Okay. So yeah, Jupiter in Leo, be loud, be proud, take up space, be confident. This can also show up with certain people shifting their beliefs or shifting their opinions or even going through some kind of spiritual or religious conversion. That could be another thing that is possible. One of the things I do want to I want to make everyone aware of is Jupiter in Leo coming into an opposition with Pluto in Aquarius. I'm caught up in this. So I have a Sun Mercury conjunction at the early degrees of Scorpio. I have my Sun at 4 Scorpio and my Mercury at 3 Scorpio. And this Jupiter ingress into Leo opposing Pluto they're both going to be squaring my Sun and my Mercury. Jupiter and Pluto for me are in the 6th and the 12th, and they're squaring my Sun and Mercury in the 9th. So what I will tell you is this Jupiter opposition to Pluto is going to challenge our beliefs, and it's going to invite us to go deeper into our spiritual journey. And we may also see some kind of corruption with Jupiterian things. Pluto exposes the toxicity, Pluto corrupts. Pluto transforms and changes. Pluto magnifies things. He makes small things big or large. Pluto also deepens, darkens, decays. These are all words associated with Pluto. And when Jupiter and Pluto are in opposition with each other, I want you to think about these two big planets, Hades and Zeus, Jupiter being Zeus and Pluto being Hades, fighting with each other, squaring off with not squaring off with each other, but opposing each other. They're on opposite ends. They're pulling at one another like this. They're fighting for power. They're fighting for authority. And if there's one thing that we know about Aquarius and Leo, these are signs of authority. These are signs of power. Aquarius is democratic power, the power of the people, the power of the collective, the power of the community. Aquarius is progressive. Aquarius is liberal. Aquarius brings us into the future. Aquarius is ideal, right? Where Leo is about centralized, consolidated power, the power of the king, the power of the hierarchy, the power of the monarchy, right? Like that's what Leo is. It's about individual concentrated power, which is why Leo has a lot to do with CEOs and celebrities and kings, because these are people these are individuals and also presidents. Leo has a lot to do with presidents and prime ministers as well, because Leo is about the consolidation and the individuation of power, right? Power given to one person, where we trust in this person's sole unique authority to distribute and administer power and justice and to keep everything, organized and whatever, right? So with Jupiter and Leo opposite Pluto and Aquarius, in this kind of opposition forming over the next month or two, we're going to be seeing, the people against celebrities, the people against the king and the queen, the people against the president, we're going to be seeing, the church again, the church standing up against the people, or I don't know, it's going to be various things. We're going to be seeing this kind of Jupiter Pluto opposition manifest in some very intense ways, but it's going to invite this deeper conversation around how power and control is distributed in society and how resources are also distributed. I think the Jupiter Pluto opposition is going to be showing us that, there's a lot of resources and a lot of power and a lot of money that's been consolidated and accumulated by individuals, right? And I think it's so interesting that the Jupiter Pluto opposition is happening at a time where, we just got our first trillionaire, and where, the billionaires and extremely wealthy are even getting richer, where the rest of us, the other 98% of us in the world are struggling financially. You know, we're dealing with more poverty, we're dealing with more hardship. And the other thing to keep in mind is what else just went into what other celestial body just changed signs. That's an indication of a period beginning of financial constriction for the masses and financial hardship and constriction of resources and food and money and stuff like this, or even, the shifting of these systems. There's going to be a little bit of a deprivation and a lack. Well, it's Chiron. He just moved into Taurus. Right? So Chiron is going to be in Taurus over the next 7 years. And Chiron was in Taurus last time the Great Depression hit. And the last time we had that dust bowl that hit the Midwest, and all the crops were destroyed. And, there was hunger and there was famine and stuff like this, right? During the Great Depression. That wasn't the last time Chiron was in Taurus, but that was during a Chiron in Taurus transit. So we got to keep in mind that it isn't just Jupiter and Leo talking to Pluto and Aquarius. It's also Jupiter and Leo squaring Chiron and Taurus, and Jupiter and Leo opposing Pluto, and then Jupiter and Pluto forming this T square with Chiron and Taurus as well. So this Jupiter transit, especially in the beginning, is going to kind of bring up maybe possible wounds that we have around our self-worth, around money, around financial security, around resources, or around our sense of material safety or stability, right? This Jupiter and Leo transit, especially in the beginning, when he's going through the beginning degrees of Leo squaring Chiron, can literally be about this woundedness that's being brought to the surface, but also some kind of salvation, some kind of help, some kind of support, right? Jupiter loves to give us a way out. Jupiter loves to help us and support us when we're going through challenging times like this. So I just want you guys to keep this in mind, okay? A lot of really complex astrology happening right now, beloveds. I'm gonna be honest with you. A lot of very complex astrology happening right now. There's a lot, the planets are talking to each other in very interesting ways. In the generational planets, the planets that kind of signify change or that, determine changing of the times and the changing of societal structures and the changing of economy and the changing of, political structures, these planets have recently moved. They're on the move, you know? They've entered new signs. Jupiter's in Leo, right? Uranus just moved into Gemini, right? Chiron just moved into Taurus, right? Pluto is at the beginning degrees of Aquarius, right? We had Saturn ingress back into, we had Saturn, Neptune go into Aries. Like these planets that indicate huge societal change and pivots. You know what I mean? I'm trying to plug in my laptop here so it doesn't die. They are telling us that times are changing, and we gotta go with the change. We gotta go with the times of change. We can't resist the change. We gotta lean into the flow. And be a part of it, right? So I want you guys to keep this in mind, okay? Because this is all very important stuff that we're discussing, okay? What I will say is Jupiter in Leo is going to be very activating for like very physically or tangibly activating for um the fixed signs, So if you are a Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, or Leo, Jupiter and Leo, especially if you have your sun, moon, and rising in this sign, Jupiter hitting a conjunction with your Leo placements, Jupiter opposing your Aquarius placements, Jupiter squaring your Scorpio or Taurus placements. Jupiter can really initiate some kind of expansion or growth, or can really bring some opportunity, but it may come on the back of, you know, some hardship, or Jupiter may make you uncomfortable, or Jupiter may tell you like, oh, well, if you want to take this risk, or if you want to take this opportunity or take this chance, you may have to like leave this thing behind, you may have to, reach for something more, reach for something greater, or you may realize that there's something that you're currently dealing with that's just outdated, it's no longer serving you, or it's not giving new life, it's not giving new energy in some type of way, okay? So, but yeah, Jupiter and Leo is going to be really good for fire signs, really good for air signs, really good for the fixed signs. I think the earth signs and the water signs are going to struggle a little bit with Jupiter and Leo. Another thing, if you're new to my page, if you're new to my work, I've been doing this for 5 years. I do readings full time. I've been doing readings for 5 years straight. I am consistently booked. Okay, so I had a few people message me. They're like, Louis, can you get me in? Because I noticed that you don't have any availability until the end of July. Well, baby, that's just how it is right now. Okay. My calendar is a little booked right now, but I've been, there's clients that I've been seeing for the last 5 years. It's so cool because they're clients that I've had who have seen me grow in my craft, and it's like such a beautiful thing. But with that being said, if you are interested in getting a reading with me and you want to kind of see how these transits are acting are activating your chart or getting things going, please book a reading with me. I promise you, you will get a lot from it. Okay, you will get a lot from it. I promise you. The only reason why I'm able to stay in business is because I'm very accurate with my work, and people see the value in it. And that's why people come back. You know what I mean? If you are really good at your craft, if you are really good at what you do, if you really love what you do, if you're passionate about it, you care about it, right? And people find value, meaning in it, you're gonna thrive and grow. You're gonna thrive and grow. You're never gonna be out of business. You're always gonna have clientele. Your books are always gonna be busy and stuff like this. And this is with any industry. This is with any craft. This is with anything. You know what I mean? If you are good at what you do, right? You you will stay booked and busy. Okay? You will stay booked and busy. So, okay. Let me take a moment to breathe because we have one more, not one more thing to talk about, but we have one more major transit to talk about this week that is building. We're already feeling it in the air. Um, and it goes exact on July 4th. And this is the Uranus and Mars conjunction in Gemini. Okay. Mars takes about a month and a half to 2 months to transit a sign. Mars is going to be in Gemini from June 28th until August 11th. Okay. I'm going to talk about the Uranus Mars conjunction first, and then I'll talk about Mars and Gemini in general. Okay. So on the 4th of July, we have Mars, the planet of fire, the planet of aggression, the planet of anger, the planet of passion, the planet of desire, the planet of violence, the planet of pain, the planet of explosives, coming into conjunction with Uranus, the planet of accidents, the planet of sudden unexpected changes, the planet of lightning bolts, the planet of liberation and freedom, the planet that rules over technology, the planet that is rebellious and autonomous and don't tell me what to do, right? It also rules over aunts, uncles, cousins, and it's connected to extended family, and it's also connected to strangers. So, what's really interesting about Uranus transits is sometimes you will have a run-in with a stranger. And when Uranus and Mars are coming into conjunction on July 4th, this can be a very toxic or unhealthy or unfun, all right, run-in with a stranger. It could be more about an argument or a fight. So let's talk about Gemini. Gemini rules over what? The hands, the ears, our arms, our chest. Well, not our chest. Our chest is actually ruled by Cancer, but the lungs. Okay, so the things behind the breasts. Okay, your lungs. That is Gemini. Okay, so with Mars, the planet of pain and woundedness, and the planet that is connected to explosions and fires and fireworks. Conjoining Uranus, the planet of accidents, in the sign of Gemini, which rules over the hands and which rules over our hearing, which rules over our arms and our fingers and our phalanges and all this, we can already put it together. It's not that hard to see that Uranus Mars conjoining on the 4th of July in Gemini can literally be about people blowing their hands up, okay? Or people experiencing some kind of damage from fireworks with their hearing, or even inhaling some kind of smoke that messes up their lungs in some type of way, okay? Also, Gemini does rule over neighbors. So, with Uranus, Mars conjunction in Gemini, do not be surprised if neighbors call the cops on people or if there's arguments or fights or fallouts with neighbors. Gemini is the sign of extended family, of cousins, of siblings, of aunts and uncles, and all of these. Also, Gemini is a sign of your next sibling beneath you, right? So, 11th house, that is your eldest sibling, the one that's directly above you. And Gemini rules over the sibling that is directly after you, okay? And all the siblings that come after you, all right? So, with that being said, with Uranus, Mars conjoining in Gemini, I want to be mindful of arguments or fights with extended family, with neighbors, with siblings, with aunts and uncles, things like this, okay? There can also be disruptions in travel. This is another thing I want you guys to be mindful of. Mercury is retrograde, ruling over that Mars Uranus conjunction in Gemini. Because why? Gemini is ruled by the sign of Mercury. So we have a Mars Uranus conjunction on top of a Mercury retrograde, right? So this can really be about, this can be about you know, uh, needing to pivot when it comes to travel plans. There could also be events that are planned on the 4th of July that may be canceled in some type of way, okay? I just want you guys to be very mindful of being in big public spaces with big crowds. You need to stay alert. You need to pay attention to your environment, okay? I'm telling you this. I'm not an astrologer that fear mongers. I do not believe in fear mongering. But I am going to be very honest with you when there is some very challenging astrology in the sky that could indicate, possible violence or possible, attacks on communities or possible arguments and things like this. I want to let you guys know that, hey, it'll be this one with the Mars Uranus conjunction in Gemini. Okay, I don't want to scare anybody. But I got to be honest with you, especially if you have anything at the early degrees of a mutable sign. So if you have anything, you have your sun, moon, or rising, or any other planet at the beginning degrees of Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, or Sagittarius, you need to be mindful of this Mars Uranus conjunction, because Mars and Uranus are coming into conjunction at 4 degrees, which is a Cancer degree. Hold on, let me just double check that. Well, actually, they're at 3 degrees. Actually, is it at 3 degrees? Yeah, it's at 3 degrees. Let me just double check. Hold on. It's at 3 degrees. My bad. I thought it was at 4 for some reason. It's at 3, which is a Gemini degree. Dot 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 dot. McDonald's got me, bro. McDonald's, they live in my head rent free. I don't even like McDonald's, but the jingle, ba 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 da ba, I'm loving that jingle. Listen, whoever did that for them, I hope they're getting paid well, because that shit lives in my brain rent free. Be coming out in the most random moments. I don't know. Maybe McDonald's is tied to Gemini in some type of way, because I was literally talking about Mars, Uranus, and Gemini. So, we've been live since about 10, something. About that long. We've been live for about an hour and some change, about an hour and 40 minutes, hour and a half. Okay. I'm gonna go back and post this though. Okay, so don't worry about it. But yes, if you have anything at the early degrees of a mutable sign, be mindful of this Mars Uranus conjunction, because it's going to be hitting you with, it's going to be either conjoining you if you have Gemini placements, it's going to be squaring you if you have Virgo Pisces placements, or it's going to be opposing you if you have Sag placements. Okay. Um, Gemini degree, Mars Uranus conjunction, and also the sign of Gemini. This also has a lot to do with cyber attacks. I'm getting a download around cyber attacks, cyber security, I'm getting a download around maybe attacks on social media. So maybe possible hacking happen around people's social media accounts. This can also be about, um, really intense announcements coming from the media. So there could be some like shocking decisions or shocking information that comes out from the media on the day of the Uranus Mars in conjunction. I want to remind you that the last time Mars and Uranus made a conjunction, which was back in Taurus in 2024, that's the day that Donald Trump was giving a speech, and there was an attempt on his life, and I'm gonna put that in quotes because we all know that Donald Trump, he's an actor. Okay, he's got third house Jupiter in Libra. He's a Leo rising. And he's Gemini sun. So this man, he's an actor. Okay, and he was on WWE for many years. All right. He's been on television for many years. He's been in movies. He's an actor. I want to remind you of this. The man is a good actor, okay? And so, who's to say that on the Mars Uranus conjunction in Taurus? I don't know. It sure looks staged to me. That's all I'm going to say, okay? But yes, we had that shocking moment where, the Uranus Mars conjunction happened on his MC, and he got shot at apparently, and then he had the little thing on his ear. Gemini rules the ears. It's connected to the ears. And he had that little thing on his ear. Remember that? Remember when all his followers were wearing the little thing on their ear? I can't. I cannot. I cannot, and I will not, and I shall not. Okay? But it was ridiculous. Anyways, that type of energy is going to be in the air on July 4th, So the worst of this, could manifest as, you know, I don't want to say it. Should I say it? I'm going to say it. Like kind of like terrorist attacks or something, or attacks on groups of people or attacks on people gathering. Okay. I don't know. I don't know, y'all. I don't know. The astrology is funky. The astrology is funky. I don't trust Mars and Gemini at all. We had a Mars retrograde in Gemini a few years ago, and that was by far one of the messiest Mars retrogrades I remember. Okay. And I just do not trust Mars and Gemini. I don't think it's a good placement for Mars. I think when people have that in the chart, I think it could be very destructive. And I don't know. It's a little funky to me, you know? The last time he retrograded was in 2022. It was October 30th of 2022 until January 12th of 2023. And that Mars retrograde in Gemini was quite messy from what I remember. Okay. And so with Mars and Gemini, I just want you guys to be very mindful, Don't get into arguments on social media. It's not worth it. Be mindful of, attacks when it comes to family and your local environment, attacks on communities. And, Uranus, Mars, and Gemini could also be about car accidents. It could literally be you walking down the street and a dog starts chasing you, or a car, randomly barrels your way or something, right? Just giving worst case scenarios. Obviously, astrology is a very complex thing, and not everyone's going to experience tragedy and hardship on the day of a Mars Uranus conjunction. But I just want to make you guys aware so that you could be more alert that day. And if your intuition is telling you, I don't know, something feels off, something feels weird, maybe it's time to leave early, or maybe I shouldn't go to this event, or maybe I should just watch it on TV. You trust that instinct. You trust your intuition. Also, take a look at your chart and see what's going on with your chart, because I really do think that your chart can show you if there's a possibility that you can go through something hard or difficult. Like for instance, if you have an early degree Mars in a mutable sign, like let's say you have Mars in Pisces at like 3 degrees or 4 degrees, or you have Mars in Virgo at 3 degrees or 4 degrees, and this Uranus Mars conjunction is literally squaring your natal Mars or opposing your natal Mars. Yeah, for you, I would say, Maybe it's okay to stay at home. You know what I mean? Maybe don't drive a car. Maybe don't drink and drive that day at all, because that Mars square in your own natal chart in the Uranus Mars conjunction, shifting and aspecting that early degree mutable placement or mutable Mars that you have can literally manifest as a situation where there is a fight, an argument, there's an accident, there's some kind of, difficult, painful, or challenging or destructive experience. You know what I mean? So I just want you guys to be mindful of that, okay? Uranus Mars conjunction though can be actually very beneficial for people as well because one of the things that Uranus and Mars both love, they love to claim their independence in space. They love to separate themselves from things that are no longer serving them. And they love to kind of like claim their independence and like do their own thing, you know? And so, the Uranus and Mars conjunction can also be about people kind of like pivoting and rebelling and claiming their own space and declaring, I am my own person. I have my own will. I have my own life. I have my own desires. I want something different for myself. I want something different for myself. Ooh, that one hit. Ooh, that one like, I don't know. That one, that gave me a little tingle in the heart space. I want something different for myself. That felt good. I don't that gave me a little bit of a tingle in here. I don't know what that phrase hit something. That struck a chord in me for some reason. I don't know. Anybody feeling that way? I just want something better for myself. Anybody, did I get that from one of y'all? I feel like I absorbed that from one of y'all, or I got that as a download or something. I heard that very loudly though. I just want something different for myself. Um, I'm also sensing benefits for Uranus Mars. Yeah, I do think the Uranus Mars conjunction, because it is sextile Jupiter, who just moved into Leo. And also if you right, if you count houses from Uranus and Mars, Jupiter's in the third house away. And if you count houses from Jupiter, Uranus and Mars is in the 11th house away from Jupiter. The 11th house is about friends. It's about goals, dreams, ambitions. It's about entrepreneurial activity. It's about connection to new groups of people. So I do think the expansiveness of Jupiter in combination with the Uranus Mars conjunction can literally be about like meeting new friends and meeting new friends that are aligned with your passions, or even getting back into alignment, because why we have a Mercury retrograde in Cancer, going back to abandoned dreams or goals or desires, or getting back into alignment with the things that you the passions, the calling, the higher mission, the vision, things like this. So I do think that Uranus Mars conjunction can also be incredibly positive for folks, and it can also be a transit that kind of initiates something, or that kind of opens up a door, or that kind of suggests or urges people to kind of break free in some type of way, to liberate themselves and claim their power and claim their independence, right? And to really maybe even say no to things that they've been saying that they should be saying yes to, or maybe they say yes to things that they should be saying, wait, is that right? They say no to things that they should be saying no to, and they say yes to things that they should be saying yes to. You know, I think the Uranus Mars conjunction is a moment of is a pivotal moment of power for people. It can be, especially if you have early degree placements in a mutable sign. If you have anything at the early degrees of an air sign, you know, um, especially Gemini, or I'm sorry, Aquarius and Libra, because you're going to be getting a trine from Uranus and Mars. If you have anything early degrees of Aquarius or anything early degrees of Libra, this Uranus Mars conjunction can actually be very supportive for you. Okay. Also, if you have anything at the early degrees of Aries or Leo, you're getting kind of the benefit of not only Jupiter's ingress into Leo, but you're also getting the benefit of a sextile from Uranus and Mars in Gemini, right? And I think what we're going to see with the Uranus Mars conjunction in Gemini, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of fire signs and air signs, like putting themselves on social media, like starting their business page, starting their Instagram, becoming more active on TikTok, getting their Substack going, getting their YouTube. Like we're going to be seeing a lot of momentum, a lot of initiative, a lot of initiating activity, a lot of kind of like fresh starts, a lot of kind of like, you know, new beginnings, from fire and air signs, especially um, Gemini, Leo, Aquarius, Libra, or all of y'all, really, I think all of you. I think Aries and Libra though, I don't know. Because I will say fire signs with Saturn and Aries, like you're not gonna get it for free. And I think y'all need to hear this. I think I think that sometimes, and this is just a hyper overgeneralization, okay? I'm really overgeneralizing here, okay? Don't take me too seriously, okay? But I think the fire signs and the air signs could want things to come easy sometimes. And they don't want to put in the work and they don't want to put in the effort, you know, because they get bored easily. They get restless, they have ADD, you know what I mean? They're impulsive. They give up real quick or they don't see things to completion. They don't see things to the end. They don't finish what they start. And I see this a lot with fire signs especially. But air signs can also get very passive and very apathetic with this. So with fire signs, it's more about boredom and restlessness. But with air signs, it's more about apathy and like, whatever, I don't care, And what I will say, if you are, you have a lot of fire, a lot of air in your chart, you're very spicy, you're very, airy and things like this. Saturn is telling you to invest the time to stay committed to the vision, to put in the work, to not give up, okay? To stay true to yourself and to kind of double down and hunker down and work hard, okay? Finish what you've started. See it to completion. Even if it's hard, even if it's difficult. Saturn, he rewards hardship. He rewards you when you challenge yourself. Always think of Saturn being the planet that has a lot to do with like obviously going to the gym is a Mars thing, but like lifting weights and getting stronger and like challenging yourself and like pushing yourself to like take on more weight. Weight is literally ruled by Saturn. Saturn rules gravity. Saturn rules over heavy things. And the way that you build muscle, which is ruled by Mars, is by what? Lifting heavy things, challenging your body to do difficult, hard things. This is why Mars, the planet that rules over muscle and passion and fire and energy and over the blood and in our body in that way, right? Like the muscles in the body. This is why Mars is exalted in Capricorn, a sign ruled by Saturn, the sign of discipline, the sign of commitment, the sign of ambition, the sign of legacy, the sign of seeing shit to the very end, the sign of death. Also, Capricorn has a lot to do with death and endings. Saturn has a lot to do with death. Before Pluto came around and before Pluto was given ownership over Scorpio, right? Saturn, the Reaper. When you meet the end of your life, Saturn rules over time and old age. Who comes to get you? The Reaper. Saturn does, right? So you always want to think about that. You know what I mean? This is why I don't like the modern rulers. This is why I don't like me being a traditional astrologer. I don't like attributing Neptune to Pisces, Pluto to Scorpio, and Uranus to Aquarius. Because that's not the way traditional astrologers have been doing astrology for millennia. Like giving the big planets rulership over these signs is a modern astrology thing. Like that's like within the last 100 years, like we started to do that. 150 years started to do that. Eons, eons of astrologers going way back in time, they always gave all 12 signs to the original seven planets. And we should always take the original traditional ruling planets, especially Jupiter over Pisces, Saturn over Aquarius, and Mars over Scorpio. We should always consider that first and foremost. before we consider modern rulers, okay? I'm telling you, it's way more accurate, and especially when it comes to timing. You can't use Pluto. I mean, you can, but you can't really use Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus for yearly timing. You can't. The planets move too slow. They're generational planets. But you will really see Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, you really see them active in people's charts when it comes to timing. It's just the truth. It's just the way it is, you know? So I want you guys to think about that, okay? Anyways, I digress. Let's get back to Mars, Uranus, and Gemini, okay? So yeah, we have this conjunction on the fourth, and we need to be very mindful of, accidents and arguments and fights and, engaging with people on social media and like difficult experiences with neighbors. But this could also be very beneficial, opportunistic, emancipating, liberating transit for folks, especially if you've been wanting to you break free from something, you've been wanting to challenge something, you've been wanting to emancipate yourself from something, you're use the energy of the Uranus Mars conjunction to do just that. Okay. I'm gonna talk about Mars and Gemini before we get into the astrology of the week. Okay, and we go talk about the day by day breakdown. Okay, of the planets and transits and things like this. So Mars is gonna be in Gemini from June 28th until August 17th. And let's talk a little bit about Mars. Okay, Mars, he is a fire starter. He brings problems and issues, and he tends to create challenges. Mars, he's not a nice planet. You know what I mean? He's kind of an angry, irritable planet. He loves to instigate problems. He loves to cause fires and things like this. So with Mars in Gemini, if you are a mutable sign, Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sag, I want you to be mindful of Mars's transit, because what you may find with Mars is in his influence on your energy is that you come into conflict, you have to fight or argue with somebody, you have to, somebody declares war on you and you got to defend yourself. Or you may feel inspired and encouraged to kind of initiate something or go in a new direction in some type of way. I think Mars transits are amazing for getting back to the gym, for getting back to passions, for kind of like tapping back into your inner power and your personal authority. I think Mars transits are amazing for that. And the mutable signs, if you have your sun, moon, and rising in a mutable sign, Mars in Gemini is going to be impacting you especially because Mars is either transiting your sign if you're a Gemini, or you have Gemini placements. Mars is squaring you if you have Virgo or Pisces placements, and Mars is opposing you if you have Sag placements, right? So Saggies, you can really experience kind of like the most challenging and most difficult energy from Mars because he is kind of like opposing you. Pisces and Virgo, Mars in Gemini can also be a little difficult or hard for you. He may instigate some kind of drama or instigate some kind of crisis or put you in some type of situation where you have to defend for yourself or fight for yourself or defend yourself or fight for yourself some type of way because he's squaring you. Okay. So I just want you guys to be mindful of this Mars and Gemini placement, especially if you're a mutable sign. Also, for the rest of you, if you don't have mutable placements, what you may find with the mutable signs during this Mars and Gemini transit is they are not going to be putting up a bullshit. The mutable signs are going to be putting their foot down. They're going to be telling people to fuck off. Okay, excuse my language. They're going to be saying, nope, I'm not down for this. I don't want to do this. I don't agree with this. They're going to be a little bit more agitated, a little bit more frustrated, a little bit more easily triggered. And they may feel a lot more vocal. Mars and Gemini stimulates our voice, right? Our ability to communicate. And Mars and Gemini is about aggressive communication. It's about impulsive communication. It's about communication that is telling people no, like fuck that, fuck you, fuck that, whatever, right? So I just want you guys to be mindful of this, especially mutable signs. Okay, I want you to be mindful of Mars's presence in the sign of Gemini. Um, for all of you in general, take a look at where your Gemini house is at. Um, Uranus just went in there. Mars is in there now. Mercury's retrograde. So your Gemini house, there can be some conflict or some drama there. There can be some, an instigative energy, or that there can be like a little bit of a fight, that breaks out, or a fire that breaks out. Like for instance, I'm a Pisces rising. And Mars just went into my fourth house of like home and family. Um, and it's funny because I just moved back home. So I'm already anticipating with Mars and Uranus coming into conjunction in my fourth house of home and family and squaring my rising. I'm already anticipating some kind of argument or some kind of fight or some kind of disagreement with my family. Okay. I'm preparing for it. Okay. And I'm gonna warn my parents too. I'm gonna tell my entire family, like, hey, listen, we got this thing. There's going to be this energy in the air on July 4th. Let's all do our best to be nice to one another and not argue and not fight. But even then, like as an astrologer, I tell my parents this all the time. I tell I let my mom or my dad know, hey, there's a full moon today. Hey, and they still give into the energies. And the shit still manifests, even with my warnings and my precautions. Mars still has a way of getting under our skin and triggering us. You know what I mean? It's really funny, actually. You guys want to see a little monk, 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 monk? Say hi. Say hi, monk, monk. You guys. Oh, like here. The people. So the people on YouTube can see him as well. You see him back there, getting all comfortable in my clothes and stuff. And people still think the moon doesn't affect them. Yeah, it's crazy, right? How can the moon not affect you? The moon pulls the tides, right? Not people's, but women's periods. Oh, well, there are trans people that have periods too. So people's periods are tied to the cycles of the moon. Like many women, will have their period on a full moon or a new moon. The moon, like, come on now, the moon has a lot to say over also wildlife and animal life. When the moon comes out, all the nocturnal creatures come out, right? The moon, it's crazy because, there are creatures in the ocean that during the day, they go to the bottom of the ocean. They literally go to the surface because they can't deal with the sun's heat. And then when the moon comes out at nighttime, all the ocean creatures, because the moon is Cancer, the ocean, right? All these little crustaceans, also the moon rules over crustaceans, so like lobsters and crabs and things, they all come to the surface to feed at nighttime when the moon comes out. There's a whole society, a whole culture of ocean creatures that come to the surface to feed and live when the moon comes out. Like, this is how powerful the moon is. We got to think about this. We got to consider this. It's like we should just look to nature to see the power of the planets. Come on now, right? So, yeah, I've been super brattier than usual. I'm a Pisces moon, Gemini rising. My boot thing is a Sag moon, Pisces rising. We've been bickering a lot, but we'll settle it through doing jujitsu. That's really funny. That's hilarious. Yeah, that's hilarious. No, he don't miss Portland at all. No, Gilbert does not miss Portland. He's glad to be out of there. He's been loving it over here, actually. Okay, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go get a snack real quick, and then we're gonna wrap up our conversation today, going over the astrology of the week. Okay. So just to recap, we covered the full moon in Capricorn. We covered Mercury retrograde in Cancer. We talked about the Sun Mercury cazimi that's tied to the retrograde. We covered Jupiter and Leo, and we also talked about the Mars Uranus conjunction in Gemini. So we are making ground today. We covered a lot of topics. The last thing we're going to end on today is going over the astrology of the week. I'm going to talk about the moon transiting the signs through the week, and I'm going to be talking about good days and more challenging days. Okay. I'll be right back though. Let me go get a little snack real quick because my tummy is rumbling and I gotta go get naked for lunch. Okay. I got these are this is like a little mm, I'll go get lunch after this. Hey Lucy. Yeah, I'll do tarot for the week either tonight or tomorrow. Probably tonight. Also, I didn't post my tarot of the week last week on YouTube. I don't know how I missed that. Well, I was so busy with moving and stuff, so I'll make sure I post the tarot of the week on YouTube this week for sure. Let me finish chewing real quick. Okay, let me pull up the chart. All right. So what's today? We're already on Wednesday, right? We had the moon in Capricorn the last few days. So today we have the moon wrapping up in Capricorn. We had our full moon in Capricorn on Monday. The moon's been transiting Capricorn ruled by Saturn. The moon squared Saturn yesterday, or the day before. Let me see. Hold on. No, the moon squared Saturn on. Oh yeah, it was yeah, it was yesterday. The moon squared Saturn yesterday. Yeah. So the last few days could have felt a little hard, a little difficult, a little burdensome. Like I don't know how have y'all been feeling the last few days. Hope I'm settling in okay. Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm settling in good. I got my lighting set up over here. You know, I have to go move. I have to go find a whatchamacallit today. Storage space for my stuff today. So that's gonna be what I'm doing today. Um, oh, the moon's gonna go into Aquarius and oppose Jupiter, so I'm gonna find a good place. But yeah, the last few days with the full moon in Capricorn, obligation, responsibility, getting your tasks done, finishing things. There could have been important things that you had to like finish or complete. And also, Mercury started retrograde on Monday, right? So we just be feeling this energy of the moon in Capricorn the last few days. It's been kind of like heavy or burdensome, or it's just been kind of busy, having to push through things. The moon in Aquarius is going to shift that energy though. So today, Wednesday, July 1st, the moon will be going to Aquarius around, I'll let you know right now. The moon's like at 29 degrees Capricorn right now. Let's see here. Yeah, so by 3 p.m. today, Pacific time, the moon goes into Aquarius and the moon's going to oppose Jupiter. And what I will tell you is the moon opposite Jupiter tonight and tomorrow is going to feel really good, really opportunistic, really expansive. Um, the moon is separating from Mercury retrograde right now, though. So today, as the moon wraps up in Capricorn and separates from Mercury retrograde in Cancer, today going to tomorrow, there could be cancellations, there could be pivots. We could go back on decisions or choices. There could also be tasks or information or mail or things from the past that come back that we find today or that are like relevant today in some type of way. So you may have to address something or work on something or do something that went and finished or that was coming back from the past that you need to like complete. Okay. So just be mindful of that today going to tomorrow. Okay. But then when the moon goes into Aquarius later on today, around 3 p.m., the moon is going to oppose Jupiter. And moon opposite Jupiter is like growth, expansion, fun, joy, celebration, luck. You know, it's a really good opportunistic. It's a good positive transit. The thing that we do got to remember though is that as the moon goes into Aquarius, he's also forming a trine with Mars, or she's also because the moon is feminine. The moon is is feminine. The moon is also forming a trine with Uranus and Mars and Gemini, and the moon is also coming into conjoin Pluto. So the moon going into Aquarius, it's going to activate the Pluto Jupiter opposition, And also Uranus and Mars trining Pluto and also sextiling Jupiter, right? So with the moon going into Aquarius over the next few days, we may find that our Aquarius, Leo, and our Gemini house get activated in some very interesting ways. There's going to be a lot of momentum or a lot of activity around those houses. I want you to be mindful today, tomorrow, and Friday of what is happening with your Aquarius, Leo, and Gemini houses, because you may see some stimulation there in those areas of your life. You may see some activity in those areas of your life, stuff like that. Um, Moon Pluto tends to be about the revelation of secrets, things coming out to the surface, us having, you know, traumatic experiences, or us literally talking about it because, Uranus, Mars, and Gemini, trine Pluto and Aquarius. This can literally be about a conversation that you have with a cousin or sibling or an aunt and uncle about something that's very hard or very difficult, or something where you're revealing a secret, or you're releasing something or letting something go that you've been carrying on your heart, on your spirit for a very long time. So moon conjunct Pluto in transit is a beautiful opportunity for cathartic release, for getting whatever's you've been holding in your heart or in your spirit or on your mind off of your chest, right? The moon Pluto in transit can bring a deep moment of vulnerability or a moment of transformation as well, or a moment of revelation. So I just want you guys to be mindful of that, especially if you have anything around the early degrees of a fixed sign, Aquarius, Scorpio, Taurus, or Leo. The other thing is, now that Chiron's in Taurus, the moon going to Aquarius is also squaring the Chiron in Taurus, right? So the moon in Aquarius transit can also bring up woundedness that we have around money or resources, or woundedness that we have around security, stability, or even around our health and beauty. The way that we look. That's another way. That's another way that Chiron in Taurus or Chiron in the second house manifests for a lot of people is sometimes it shows up, the wound shows up with our own beauty, the way that we look, our relationship with our body, or our relationship with food, you know, as I'm munching. um, so I want you guys to just be aware of that. When the moon goes into Aquarius later on today, as the moon transits Aquarius over the next 3 days, okay? What I will say, the pros of this though, this is a really opportunistic transit, moon in Aquarius, trining Uranus, Gemini, to meet people, to make friends, to befriend strangers. It's a really good transit to kind of like connect to new people. Also, if you're thinking about, I don't know why I'm getting this as a download. If you're thinking about applying to schools or applying for jobs, or if you need to take like a test and you have control over the timing, the moon in Aquarius, opposite Jupiter and trine Uranus and Mars, later on today and tomorrow morning could be like a really good time to take that test. Okay. And just like pull the trigger on that thing or do that thing. So, okay. I just want to keep that in mind. All right. So then you put that away. The moon moves on. I'm looking at 10 p.m. No, this is 9 p.m. I'm looking at 9 p.m. and that's 9 p.m. this evening, Pacific time, and that's when Moon Pluto come together. Okay. So the next big transit that the moon is going to make is its opposition to Venus in Leo. And we love this energy. Moon opposite Venus is ideal for creativity, for romance, for dates, for dancing, for music, for going to an art festival, you know. So the moon is not going to be, it's going to be kind of floating around on Thursday. So the moon is going to be separating from Pluto and Uranus and Mars, but the moon is only transit it's going to be, or the only aspect it's going to be making is a sextile to Saturn and Aries. So the moon and Saturn are in a sextile on Thursday before Friday comes around, Friday morning, and when the moon opposes Venus. So the moon in Aquarius sextile Saturn on Thursday could be about obligation, responsibility, tasks, things that you got to get finished or things that you got to get done. And there could be in this element of like, I don't want to do this thing, or you can feel very resistant to the tasks. But Saturn is like, no, no, no. You got to get it done. You got to do this thing. It's very, very important. You got to take responsibility. You got to, help someone out. So there can be some kind of burden or some kind of responsibility that you got to take um, on behalf of someone else, or even something that you got to, like an obligatory task that you got to complete or finish on Thursday. So just be mindful of this, okay? But then we have this beautiful, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know why I did that. I've been watching too much anime. Oh, I love it when the little anime girls they're like, oh. um, on Friday, Friday morning around 9 p.m. or 9 a.m., the moon comes into an opposition with Venus. And this is ideal for displays of affection, for romance, for love, for going on a date. Anybody here going on a date on Friday, or they're going to like a concert, or they're going to like a birthday party or a celebration on Friday? Anybody? Friday night? Doing anything really cool, really fun on Friday night? Or maybe you have plans to go to like an art festival or something, or a concert. That's going to be a theme Friday and Saturday. I'm going to a comedy show? Oh, that's cool. That's funny. Very Uranus Mars. I have a question for you. Are you going to a comedy show where the comic attacks people in the audience? I wouldn't be surprised. Do not be surprised. Oh yeah, well it's the 4th of July. Yeah, true, true, true. Yeah, it's gonna be 4th of July. Well, by the time the 4th of July comes around, the moon's in Pisces. So come Saturday the 4th, the moon goes into Pisces, and the moon's with the North Node. And this brings us back to Jupiter in Leo, right? So the moon North Node in Pisces is being disposited by Jupiter in Leo. Okay. My biggest concern on Saturday is not just the Uranus Mars conjunction. Oh, someone said people attack him and he defends himself. That's really funny. My biggest concern is not the Mars Uranus conjunction. Now that I'm actually looking at the transits on Saturday, July 4th, the moon in Pisces is actually going to be making a direct square to Uranus and Mars. The good thing is that it's an overcoming or superior square. So the moon, North Node in Pisces on Saturday, squaring Uranus and Mars, is actually in a very strong position compared to um, where Uranus and Mars are at in terms of the relationship. So if you count houses, right, from Uranus and Mars, Pisces is in the 10th house. Gemini has Pisces in the 10th house. And so the moon in Pisces is in a stronger, superior position. It's an overcoming square to Uranus and Mars. So this tells us that even though there may be some emotional conflicts or there may be some difficult experiences with the moon squaring Uranus and Mars, things can actually work out for the better. There could be some kind of solution, or there can be like good outcomes possibly. But you got to be mindful though, because Pisces is the sign of the victim. Pisces is the sign of victimization, of martyrs, of those that sacrifice themselves or those that get sacrificed. So the moon in Pisces squaring Uranus and Mars on Saturday, I don't know. To me, that square with the moon and Uranus and Mars, I don't know. It's a little rough. Also, the nodes are tied in. Yeah, the U.S. is going through a Saturn return. Uh-huh. Wait, no, not the Saturn return. The US is going through their solar return on July 4th. The US is actually having a Saturn opposition right now. So America the Beautiful has Saturn in Libra. So Saturn in Aries is opposing the United States Saturn in Libra. This is why there's a lot of enemies being revealed, or this is why Saturn in Aries for the United States is going to be about a coalition of enemies that go against them. You know, California is going through a Saturn return. Yes, California has Saturn in Aries, which is very concerning because California not only has the signature of fires in their chart, which is why California is always in fire because they have Saturn in Aries, but California also has a signature of a major earthquake that's coming, you guys. I'm gonna be honest with you, and we'll talk more about it some other time. This is not the live for that, but I will talk to you guys about timing around that. There is more than likely going to be a big earthquake that's coming for California, and that's probably going to happen next year. And I'll talk about that. We'll get there when we get there. Okay, I don't want to scare anybody, but it is in the United States chart. But anyways, what I wanted to say about Saturday is the moon is going to be in Pisces, squaring Uranus and Mars in Gemini. The good thing is that the moon is being disposited by Jupiter, who's in a really strong position. He's sextiling the Uranus, Mars, and Gemini. Um, and he's also trining Pluto. Let me get back to that astrology. Hold on, let me see. He is quincunxing the moon, though, you know? So the moon and Jupiter are in a quincunx with each other, but it's fine. But yeah, just be a little mindful, okay, of Saturday because the moon in Pisces with the North Node. Also, because the moon is conjunct the North Node, whenever the moon transits the nodes, we get and it's like eclipse energy is in the air, you know? Eclipse energy is chaotic, it's unstable, it has a lot to do with fate and karma and destiny. The nodes also have a lot to do with situations and circumstances that happen to where they're out of our control in some type of way. Like we don't have agency over them. Like it's just, we have to just surrender to the experience and let it happen. So I just want people to be mindful of that with the moon in Pisces on Saturday, okay, with conjoining the North Node and squaring Uranus and Mars. Moon square Mars Uranus, accidents, injury, also drinking. Oh my God. Be mindful of taking drugs. Do not take too many drugs. Stay away from fentanyl. Stay away from drugs that you do not know where the fuck they came from. No moonshine, no homemade anything, okay? Be mindful of your alcohol levels. Do not drink too much on the 4th of July. I will tell you right now, the combination of the North Node moon in Pisces, which has a lot to do with alcoholism, has a lot to do with drugs, has a lot to do with escapism, has a lot to do with people passing out, has a lot to do with, you know, um, alternative states of consciousness, literally going to sleep, Pisces. Pisces is the dream world. Pisces is hallucination. Pisces is your drunken state. Pisces is that weird alter ego, that weird personality that comes out when you are under the influence. That's Pisces, okay? The id, the ego behind the ego is what Pisces is connected to. So, with the moon in Pisces squaring Mars, Uranus, and Gemini, this can literally be a combination that manifests as someone drinking too much alcohol, getting aggressive, getting argumentative, and them fighting and arguing. This can also manifest as, someone getting into a drunken brawl with a stranger, okay? Or someone getting into a drunken brawl with a neighbor. So we need to be very mindful of not only what we're drinking or whatever we're putting into our body, but also others. If you know that there's family members or friends that are prone to being violent or combative or being argumentative or difficult when they're under the influence, you might want to monitor their alcohol intake. You might want to monitor whatever they're putting into their body, okay, on the 4th of July, because I'm telling you right now, moon north node in Pisces squaring Mars, Uranus, and Gemini can definitely be a recipe for disaster. It could definitely be a recipe for drunk arguments and drunk fights and stuff like this. Okay? And that's going to be on Saturday, all right? And then the moon We do have this kind of like by evening time on Saturday. Oh, well, the sun's gonna come into square with the sun is also building into square with Saturn. You know, the beautiful thing though is we do have the moon trine the sun. Oh, so that feels really good. So, on the like the evening of the 4th of July, the moon in Pisces comes in to trine the sun in Cancer, which is really sweet, which is really nice and stuff like this. But also the sun is at 13 Cancer and the sun is building into a square with Saturn and Aries, who's at 14. So this can be about problems or issues with authority figures, with police officers, with those that, you know, that those that enforce the rules and the regulations of society. This can also be about issues or problems with elderly people or, those that are older in some type of way or those that have, power, authority, they have time on their side. There could be some challenges or difficulties. Saturn and the Sun are enemies. Saturn and the Sun do not like each other, okay? And they do not get along. And they are Saturn and the Sun are in a cosmic karmic battle for authority and power. Saturn and the Sun are both fighting each other. They've been fighting each other since the beginning of time. They're going to be fighting each other to the very end of time because they are cosmic enemies. They are each other's antithesis. The sun is daytime, Saturn is nighttime. You know what I mean? The sun is about joy and fun and life, and Saturn is about endings, death, and tragedy and hardship, right? They're each other's antithesis, but they also complement each other and they balance each other out because they are two sides of the same coin, really, in some ways, right? So with the sun squaring Saturn on Saturday and Sunday, and Saturn's in a stronger position. So that's the other thing we got to think about, okay? Um, Saturn's in the 10th house away from the sun. So Saturn wins out here in this battle between Saturn and the sun this weekend on Saturday and Sunday. Saturn in Aries wins. He wins. He's in the overcoming square to the sun, you know? So it's not a good time to defy authority figures, to cuss out the cops, to resist, you know, the government's instruction. Okay, it's just not. Or those that work for the government, those that work for the regulatory authorities. It's not a good weekend to resist them or to fight them because they will win. Saturn's in an overcoming square. So Saturn gets to tell the sun, no, you can't behave like that. You can't do that. Things like this. So just be mindful of that, okay? On Saturday going into Sunday, the sun building into a square with Saturn. But also the moon is also trining the sun. So there is kind of like a way out. There is like a solution. We can if someone is going through a moment of difficulty or hardship, one of the things that we should try is kind of like emotionally appealing to them, maybe pulling them aside and separating them from the crowd or the group, getting some alone time with them and kind of working through things with them and talking through things with them. That would probably be the best thing to do on Saturday and Sunday, okay? With the moon trine the sun. The moon trine the sun is kind of giving us a little bit of a way out from the sun squaring Saturn. It's alleviating pressure with the moon squaring Uranus and Mars, and Saturn squaring the sun. The moon and the sun are still talking to each other in a very harmonious way. So there's definitely some kind of good connection. There's some good energy there. It gives the energy of fun, celebration, family coming together. Another big thing, I think this is going to be a 4th of July with a Mercury retrograde in Cancer, where we see family or we see people from the past, maybe even lovers for some of you, that you haven't seen in a long time. So this can be a 4th of July where there's a cousin that shows up, an uncle or an aunt, or you may visit, a family member's house that you haven't been there in a long time. You haven't seen them in a long time. I will tell you this Mercury retrograde in Cancer is going to be digging in pretty deep. It's going to be digging into the past. It's going to be bringing things from the past, because Cancer is a nostalgic sign. It is connected to the past. So Mercury retrograde in Cancer tends to reach extra deep into the past, and stuff like that. So just be mindful of that as well this weekend, okay? Kind of seeing old friends, seeing old classmates, seeing family members I haven't seen in a long time, that could be a theme, all right? Um, so then Sunday comes around, and then the moon is wrapping up in Pisces on Sunday. And then on Sunday, the moon is separating from a trine with Mercury, a square with Saturn, and then the moon comes into a beautiful trine with Mercury retrograde in Cancer. Mercury retrograde in Cancer. So I'm looking at 6 p.m. Sunday, Pacific time. I'm looking at the moon at 22 degrees, approaching a trine with Mercury retrograde in Cancer. So this is pretty positive. To me, this is kind of like us talking about our week ahead or us planning what's going to be happening with the week, you know. There could be some very interesting information that comes in on Sunday night that's connected, that's tied to your Mercury retrograde in some type of way. Okay, so you want to just be aware and be alert of what kind of information, what kind of connections, what kind of communication, you receive throughout the weekend, especially on Sunday evening, because it can be tied to your Mercury retrograde themes or topics in some type of way, or it can speak to what your overall Mercury retrograde story or stories are going to be about. Okay, and that's going to be on Sunday. Moon trine Mercury could also be about hanging out with our cousins, aunts, uncles. This could also be a day where people hang out with coworkers, or you run into a coworker that you haven't seen in a long time. Okay, Moon trine Mercury, Moon in Pisces trine Mercury retrograde in Cancer. Yeah, the North Node in Cancer at 23. Oh, this is an important Mercury retrograde for you. Mercury's retrograding on your North Node. What do you want to do? You want to move? You want to have a baby? Are you thinking about moving? Are you thinking about having a baby? Are you thinking about making a big change with your job? Is there a sibling that you want to reconnect to? You've been thinking about calling a sister or a brother, or maybe even your own mom. Maybe your mama. Maybe you haven't talked to your mom in a long time. And the Mercury retrograde is like, hey, you know what? Maybe you should talk to her. Maybe you should give her a phone call. Maybe there is an opportunity for you guys to amend things and fix things. Whenever a planet retrogrades on your North Node, you need to consider what it wants you to reflect on, you know? Whenever a planet is retrograding over your North Node, because the North Node is going to bring some kind of like karmic experience, or the North Node may can have you confront something. The North Node is about our karmic direction and the things that we have to confront, whether we like it or not. It's kind of like the North Node is tied to our own personal threads of fate. Just moved last September, just started a new job in May. Well, yeah, you keep me updated. Let me know how that manifests for you, okay? With Mercury going retrograde over your North Node. But yeah, my loves, that's where we end the week, and then we begin next week with the moon going into the sign of Aries, and that's what we will pick up on the astrology of next week. Okay. We've been here for 2 hours. That is pretty good timing considering all the things that we covered today. I'm gonna be honest. Sometimes my lives do go for 3 hours. It's happened before. It's happened before where I was live for 3 hours. But everybody that spent time with me today, I love you so much. Thank you for being here, and like thank you for just giving me your time and giving me your love and giving me your attention. I'm so grateful and appreciative for this work. I'm so grateful and appreciative for my beautiful community that I built around my work. And I'm grateful that you guys, tune into me and you stay tapped in. And I'm just so grateful for all these things. 'Cause I have a very beautiful life. I live a very privileged life, I must say. And it's you guys that make it happen. If I didn't have my little group of my little community of people, I'd be working at the bank right now. Okay. I'd be working at the bank. So you guys make so much possible for me, and I'm very aware of this. And this is why I pour so much love, and I put so much time, and I put so much care into my craft, because it's extremely meaningful to me, and I know it's extremely meaningful to you as well, you know? And I think Why am I getting emotional? Look at me. Uh-oh, the tears are coming. Uh-oh, Pisces rising. Okay, what's going on? Let me see. Hold on. Wait. Let's see what's going on right now. I'm about speech. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Well, there it is. The rising is in my eighth house. Oh, my South right now. Um, the rising is going through my eighth house, and the moon just went into Aquarius in my 12th house. Okay, but one of the things that is so beautiful about astrology is for me, I don't know how you guys experience it, or for those of you that are, maybe you're in your spiritual journey, maybe you're into tarot astrology, or it's something that, you're getting deeper in, is, you know, the planets, the cards, and, all these divination things, this is the way that God talks to me, and when we really build a relationship with the planets, we get into conversation with them and we start to understand that they're doing God's work, you know? The planets are literally administering God's judgments, God's wisdom, God's activity. Like the planets are the ones that are kind of the orchestrators, of this beautiful magical thing that we're experiencing here on Earth, this time that we're given, and the planets have so much to say over our life. But the beautiful thing is that when we cultivate a relationship with the planets and we really build a relationship with the stars, they start to speak to us. They start to speak to us in ways that they don't talk to anybody else, you know? And this has been my own experience with astrology. This is what keeps me coming back. This is what, keeps me engaged. This is why, my astrological practice has grown and I go deeper and deeper into my journey with it. It's because God's talking to me through the planets. And this is the way that God speaks to me, you know? And it's a beautiful thing. And I feel for those that don't have that connection with the divine, with spirit, with God, with their ancestors, with their guides. I feel for them, I feel for them because when we have that relationship with the higher power in whatever way that you want to conceive of it, or whatever your spiritual religious tradition is, there's this love and this trust, and there's this divine understanding, this divine acceptance of things that really can't be replaced by anything else, you know? Like, I have such a conviction, not only in my craft, but also in my spiritual journey, and also in like the wisdom and the knowledge and the guidance that I receive from the divine. You know what I mean? And astrology has really become a safe space for me. And it's become a way of understanding life. It's become a lens of how I see the world. And it's also become a lens for how I see people, you know? And it's a beautiful gift. It's such a beautiful gift. We are in this amazing time right now where we are able to study and practice astrology and be astrologers or tarot readers or whatever, or spiritual workers or whatever, in an environment that is safe, where we can actually do our work and not feel threatened by the church, or not feel like we're going to be burned at the stake, or not being, politically hunted down like spiritualists, occult workers, healers have been in generations of the past, you know? So really guys, I want you guys to understand that, you know, that being able to access astrology, being able to have the wisdom of your birth chart is such a privilege. It's such a privilege. Even up until 60 years ago, every chart had to be hand drawn. You couldn't just go on a website and go online and punch your date, time, and place of birth in and get your chart all there for you. Everything is being given to us. Everything is so easy. If you want to learn astrology, just go on YouTube. You don't even have to take classes. There's an overabundance of astrological information that's available for free on the internet. You don't even have to pay for these things. It's a privilege to have access in the ways that generations prior didn't. And I don't think people understand this. People don't see this. We're so ungrateful. We're so entitled. We're so privileged that we don't understand that the technology is a privilege. Access to astrological information is a privilege. Being able to practice astrology openly is a privilege. These are all privileges, right? And we got to take advantage of this moment as spiritual workers, as healers, as occult practitioners, as tarot readers, as astrologers. We got to take advantage of this moment. We don't have an excuse. We really don't. Especially those of you that, you want to make spiritual work or astrology or tarot like a full-time business or whatever. You want to make this like it's like your life's calling, right? Like, what are you afraid of? The church isn't hunting you down right now, the political environment isn't like, rounding up astrologers and tarot readers right now. Like, seize the moment, coup de grace. What does coup de grace mean? I don't even know what that means. Let's take a look and see. Seize the moment, my loves. We are in a divine moment of privilege. Coup de grace is overcoming. That's not. That's not. Coup de grace is. Let's see. Hold on. What does that even mean? Uh, let's see what it means. Blow a stroke of grace. A stroke of grace. Oh. A definitive finishing blow. Carpe diem. Yeah, there you go. Seize the day. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for carpe diem. Coup de grace is literally like delivering like the finishing last blow to like, kill something. That's what coup de grace. Wrong word. Okay, but yeah, carpe diem, seize this moment, seize this divine opportunity to, be able to practice astrology and study astrology and, get deep into the occult wisdom and magic in a way that we weren't able to do before, we weren't safe to do in previous generations. It's a very beautiful moment for that. So I just want to share that, okay? And don't be lazy. Well, that's another thing. That's another affliction of this generation, of this current period is like people want everything so easy and they want things to be done for them and they don't want to have to put in the work. Well, guess what? Astrology is not easy. It's not. I'm not going to lie to you and say it's easy because it's not. You know, I make it look easy because I have a natural talent for it. But I put in a lot of hours. I put in a lot of time. I put in a lot of energy into my astrological practice. I read a lot of books. You guys saw you guys see all the books that I be reading and the stuff I share with you guys. You cannot be lazy. You have to try and you have to study and you have to read and you have to research and you have to really apply yourself. Um, if school was hard for you, astrology is going to be hard for you. I'm going to be honest with you. You know what I mean? I'm gonna be honest. Astrology is not something that you can learn overnight. It's not. It takes time for it to settle in. It takes time for it to seep into the brain and for it to make sense. But you got to stay committed. You got to stay committed. You got to stay committed. Keep studying, keep reading, keep learning, keep expanding, keep growing. And you will get better at it over time and eventually it will click. I promise. It will click. I promise. Okay. I love you all so much. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves. Be well. That was my last little, my final thoughts, my Jerry Springer final thoughts. And yeah, I'll see you guys on Instagram. I'll see you guys on YouTube. And if you're interested in booking a reading with me, click on my link tree. That's where all my services are. I do natal chart readings, I do synastry readings, I do solar return, year ahead readings, I do generational readings, I do children's chart readings. I do all the readings, okay? That's why I don't know, I'd be tripping sometimes. I mean, I don't want to bring this up and whatever, but I'm gonna finish up with this. I'd be tripping sometimes when other astrologers be coming for me. Like, do you not know that I've been in business? I've been practicing. Okay? Listen, you little Mr. Mrs. Amateur astrologer, you only do what is it? You only do what are those readings? Horary readings, okay? You only do horror. You don't do natal chart readings. You don't do synastry readings. You don't do solar return readings. You don't do children's chart readings. You don't do generational readings where you're looking at family chart. You do one reading. You do horary, and that's it. You, you stay over there in your little street, okay? You on your little pathway that no one's noticing. Baby, I'm on the freeway. Pop, 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 pop. I built my own freeway, okay? You can't come close to me. You can't touch this. I've been practicing now for five. I've been in business for five. I've been doing this full time for 5 years. It may not seem like a long time, but it is a long time when you do it every day the way that I do. Okay. It's just weird. Like, who do you think you are? You know nothing about what I'm talking about. Okay. So get off my freeway. Get out of my lane. Get out of my way. I got work to do. It's just crazy to me. Crazy to me. Come to Mother's Beach. Heading there too. No, I got work to do. I got some things I got to take care of. But the audacity, right? Like the audacity. Like, baby, we're not even in the same lane. You're not, I don't even, dude, like, you know what it really is? Like, the truth about it, we are our only competition. That's one of the things being a swimmer taught me, when I did swimming growing up. The only person I was in competition with was myself. I was always trying to beat my own time in swimming. In swimming, you're always trying to beat your own time. It doesn't really matter what other people's times are. Everyone is kind of, you're trying to beat your own time. It's about a self-improvement thing. And really that's how I think about like success and career and work in general. Like the only person that we are really in competition with is ourselves, you know? It's delusion, it's projection, it's insecurity to think that someone else is a threat to our own success, to our own goals, to our own ambitions. That is false thinking. That is insecure thinking. That is not true. The only person you are in competition with when it comes to your career success is you. Is you. And people have a pattern, right? We have a pattern, we have a tendency to project the enemy onto others and to perceive the competition outwardly when actually the enemy is within. The only person we are actually in competition with is ourselves. That's the truth. You know, Anything outside of that is insecurity. Anything outside of that is projection. Especially in this industry, especially when it comes to like astrology, tarot, and things like this. You know what I mean? So it's just like it's crazy to me, dude. It's just crazy, like the amount of just weird, funky energy I get from mainly other astrologers. Mainly other astrologers, and it's like, baby, like I'm not even attached to, and I talked about this before. I'm not even attached to the identity of being an astrologer. Like, I don't even want to be. If an astrologer looks like that, I don't want to be that. That's not me. Okay, I do astrology, and I'm really good at it and I use it as a tool of divination to serve people and do my spiritual work. But I'm not attached to the identity. I don't have any ego invested in being an astrologer. I just really don't. I don't need to. You know why? Because my astrological practice and my work speaks for itself. You know? It speaks for itself. Period. You know what I mean? I don't need to claim the identity of being an astrologer to feel good about myself or to feel like I'm a good astrologer. I don't need that. Because why? My work is evidence of that already. You know what I mean? My clients and my experience with my clients and the feedback I get is evidence of that already. So, I'm not attached to the identity of being an astrologer. I'm not attached to the identity of being a tarot reader. These are tools that I use that I'm great at, but there's no ego attached to it. There's no pride associated with that for me. But, with these astrologers that I come into that I have, bad experiences with or that, will come for me and just be weird with me, right? I can see just how insecure they are around their knowledge, around their practice, and the majority of them, they don't, the truth is that they don't have a following. they're not booking readings, they don't have clients, and they're just mad about it and they're frustrated and they're looking for someone to blame, so it's so easy for them to just try to claim superiority and think they know more or whatever, right? And to come for me or come for other people that maybe have a bigger following or that are maybe more established, right? To make themselves feel better. But baby, that's not doing nothing for you. Your books are still empty. You still got nobody following your work. You still got nobody, like what you're wasting your time and your energy. Like focus on your craft, on your journey, on what you got to be doing. Don't worry about what other people are doing. This is super important, like it's a general message for people. Like focus on you, focus on your work, on the way you're shining, on what you want to put out to the world. Don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about all the noise and what other people are doing. Don't even do that. That's your Scorpio energy bringing up their shadow. Yeah, and you know what it is? It's always Leos. It's been a pattern with people that have Leo placements. I've noticed this. Like the astrologers that have come from me, all of them have had Leo placements. That's my sixth house, and my Scorpio energy squares Leo. So it's crazy. There's something about Leo energy. I have my Lilith there as well. I just trigger Leo so much. They're my sixth house, my Scorpio stuff squares them. Like it's just I'd really be showing them like what they don't know. You can't perform it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Leo, listen, okay? You cannot perform astrology. You actually have to be good at it. You have to do it. You have to do, I will call you out on your shit. And I think that's the role of Scorpios when it comes to Leos. We call them out on their shit because we see through all the performative bullshit. We see through all the fakeness. We see through all the with the celebrity culture. Scorpio energy sees through all that bullshit. Sees through all that ego and performance and pride and arrogance. It's doing is covering up insecurity. That's all it's doing. I could see right through that bullshit. I could tell when someone's not confident around their work, around their craft, you know? And that's not my problem. Listen, if you feel intimidated by my knowledge about my work, if you feel triggered by what I'm putting out into the world, that is not a me problem, baby. That's a you problem. You need to take a look at yourself. That has nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? It's weird, but yeah, I've noticed that the majority of the astrologers that have come for me, they've had Leo placements. You challenge their knowledge of what they believe it's fact when the astrology is multifaceted, which is why so many systems exist. Yeah, and I've also a lot of them they study a certain branch of astrology. A lot of them are Hellenistic astrologers, so they study ancient astrology, but they haven't studied vocational astrology. They haven't studied medical astrology. They haven't studied Vedic astrology. They haven't studied what's another evolutionary astrology or modern astrology, which I've dabbled in all of them. I've dabbled in all these things. I love Judith Hill. I love medical astrology. I love Stephen Forrest. I love evolutionary astrology. I love Vedic astrology. I love Eastern astrology. I love sidereal astrology. I've studied all these things, and I take what works. I use what works. I take all these, my knowledge from these different traditions and I combine them to make them my own. You know what I mean? And whatever, if it works, I'm going to use it. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to use it. That's my philosophy. But all right, my loves, I gotta go. Thank you for hearing me, listen to me vent at the end there. I just needed to let that out. I just needed to let that out. You guys take care of yourselves, be well. My phone is at 1%, so I absolutely gotta go right now. But I will see you guys all on Instagram and everything, okay? All right, bye.